Chapter 2338. The ancient altar occupied a vast area, as if it was boundless. Around the altar, there were statues of all shapes and sizes. Some were humanoid, while others were monstrous. All of them had different postures and expressions. Surrounded by these statues of different shapes like stars surrounding the moon, there was a huge statue of a human. This was a middle-aged man with a face full of curly beard. His messy hair draped over his shoulders. His figure was sturdy and tall, and his perfect muscles seemed to contain explosive strength. He stepped on a high platform with one foot. His upper body was bare, and he held an incomparably huge axe in his hand. He raised his head and looked at the sky. His eyes were filled with disdain, and he looked like he was going to compete with the heavens. Ancestor. Ancestor. Yang Zhenxing, the patriarch of the Human Devil clan, said respectfully. His voice reverberated in the air around the altar, lingering in the air. The reason why this happened was because the altar was surrounded by mountains. Because of this, there was such an echo. Who is making a ruckus here? A moment later, an ice-cold voice that contained anger resounded in a timely manner. It seemed to have come from all directions. Along with this voice, a figure appeared out of thin air above the altar like a ghost. It was a burly old man in a green robe. He had a strong back and a bare waist. The old man had a head of long gray hair draped behind his back. His pair of tiger-like eyebrows gave off a dignified aura, setting off his firm square face. Grand Master. The moment Yang Zhenxing saw the face of the burly old man, he could not help but cry out in surprise. In the next moment, he looked at the robust old man again, as if he had seen a ghost. The face in front of him was not unfamiliar to him. Of course, this did not mean that he had seen this old man before. The reason why he could recognize the old man in front of him was because he had seen a portrait of the old man before, and that portrait was hanging in his master's room. Martial granduncle? Hearing Yang Zhenxing's exclamation, the burly old man could not help but frown. This was because he did not know the person in front of him, and he was certain that this was the first time they had met. Martial granduncle, my master is Liao Naijiang. I'm my master's last disciple, Yang Zhenxing. Yang Zhenxing seemed to have seen the doubts of the sturdy old man, and he did not dare to hesitate. He immediately showed a humble expression and introduced himself respectfully. At this very moment, Yang Zhenxing's heart was in turmoil. He had never imagined that his martial granduncle, who was also his master's martial uncle, was actually still alive. Didn't he fail his tribulation long ago? Counting the time. Presently, more than 4,000 years have passed since this martial granduncle failed to transcend the tribulation. In other words, he's a four-tribulation bodiless celestial now? Yang Zhenxing's heart trembled. Although he knew there were still many bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan, he did not know how many there were. The only bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan he knew were his master, Liao Naijiang, and the forefather of the Human Devil clan. The reason he knew about the forefather of the Human Devil clan was because after he had become the patriarch of the Human Devil clan, he had learned about the existence of the forefather of the Human Devil clan from the previous patriarch of the Human Devil clan. He had also learned how to contact the forefather of the Human Devil clan. It was precisely because of this that he had appeared here. As for the other bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan, he did not know how many of them there were, nor did he know who they were. However, when he saw the old man standing in front of him, he realized that Yang Zhenxing was a bodiless celestial. Among the bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan, one of them was his martial granduncle, Yang Xiangjun. So you're Yang Zhenxing, that child's direct disciple. Upon hearing Yang Zhenxing's self-introduction, the cold expression on the face of the muscular old man, Yang Xiangjun, faded. It was replaced with a smile. I've heard of you. You're currently the patriarch of our Human Devil clan. Greetings, martial granduncle. At this time, Yang Zhenxing also formally bowed to Yang Xiangjun. But why did you come here personally to look for the ancestor? But what happened to the clan? Even if something happened to the clan, it should be your master coming here to look for the old ancestor. Yang Xiangjun asked with a frown. Before today, Yang Zhenxing did not know Yang Xiangjun was still alive. However, Yang Xiongju Yang Zhenxing was the current patriarch of the human devil clan. Apart from Yang Zhenxing, Yang Zhenxing's master, Liao Naijiang, who was a three-tribulation bodiless celestial, was also in charge of the human devil clan. In his opinion, even if something really happened to the human devil clan, it should be Liao Naijiang, who came to look for the ancestor of the human devil clan, not Yang Zhenxing. Because of this, Yang Xiongjuan had an ominous premonition in his heart. Martial granduncle master has already passed away. As soon as Yang Xiongjuan finished speaking, Yang Zhenxing muttered with a sorrowful expression on his face. His voice was filled with sorrow, causing the atmosphere in the surroundings to become heavy. What? Naijiang is dead? After the ominous premonition in his heart was confirmed, Yang Xiongjuan's face suddenly changed. He stared at Yang Zhenxing and asked in a deep voice, Who? Who killed Naijiang? Was it a bodiless celestial from the Lion Devil clan, or the Tiger Devil clan? Or was it a bodiless celestial from the Ox Devil clan? Yang Xiongjuan's expression darkened as he asked these questions. The devil clans he mentioned were the strongest devil clans in the devil clans. Apart from the three devil clans, the human devil clan was also one of the strongest devil clans in the devil clans. In Yang Xiongjuan's opinion, the human devil clans were extremely strong. In the entire exiled realm, only the bodiless celestials from the three devil clans would have the courage to kill a bodiless celestial from the human devil clan. None of them. Yang Zhenxing shook his head bitterly. Before he could finish, Yang Xiongjuan asked in a cold and hurried tone, Which clan of itinerant immortals did it? I'd like to know. Apart from the Lion Devil clan, the Tiger Devil clan, and the Ox Devil clan, which other devil clans would dare to provoke the human devil clan? As he spoke, Yang Xiongjuan's tone became colder and colder, giving people a feeling as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Master, he wasn't killed by a bodiless celestial from the devil clans. Yang Xiongjuan was taken aback by Yang Zhenxing's reply. He wasn't killed by a bodiless celestial from the devil clans? Then, who killed him? Martial granduncle. The human devil clan has left the exiled realm with the devil clans and invaded the Saint Province realm. Moreover, we've occupied the Debussy subterranean realm. Yang Zhenxing realized Yang Zhenxing was unaware of this. Yang Xiongjuan was most likely unaware that the devil clans had invaded the Saint Province realm a few years ago. For this reason, Yang Xiongjuan patiently explained how the human devil clan had invaded the Debussy subterranean realm and occupied the Azure Cloud Mansion's territory. He went on to talk about recent events. He told Yang Xiongjuan about how Duan Lingtian, the young mansion master of Azure Cloud Mansion, had snuck into the Wandering Saint Palace and faced the Celestial Ascension Tribulation with the Palace Master of Wandering Saint Palace. He used someone else's Celestial Ascension Tribulation to attract the Celestial Ascension Tribulation. Moreover, he succeeded. Because there had never been such a precedent in the history of the demon race, even Yang Xiongjuan couldn't help but be dumbfounded when he heard about this. However, he was even more confused when he heard what happened next. Duan Lingtian, the young mansion master of Azure Cloud Mansion, cast an assist-type divine ability after he became an eminent celestial. That assist-type divine ability boosted his strength to a ridiculous level. At this point, Yang Zhenxing couldn't help but shudder in his heart. If he had not crushed the fiery blood evasion talisman in time, he would have been killed by Duan Lingtian. After all, even his master, Liao Naijiang, a three-tribulation bodiless celestial, could not withstand a single blow from Duan Lingtian before he was killed by Duan Lingtian. Naijiang was killed by him in just a single blow. The sword strike he used to kill Naijiang not only tore the void apart, but it even left behind a tear in the void that took about 30 minutes to completely heal. Yang Xiongjuan was dumbfounded when he learned about this from Yang Zhenxing. This is impossible. Yang Xiongjuan shook his head as he looked at Yang Zhenxing. His rationality told him that it was impossible. It was impossible for someone who had just become an eminent celestial to possess such strength. How could someone tear the void apart and leave a tear in the void that would take 30 minutes to heal? Even he did not possess such a technique. Even if he used all his strength to tear the void apart, it would only take a few moments for the tear to heal. Only a 5 tribulation bodiless celestial, or stronger, would be able to tear the void apart and leave a tear in the void that would take 15 minutes to heal. I'm afraid only a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial, or stronger, would be able to tear the void apart and leave a tear in the void that would take 30 minutes to heal. For this reason, Yang Xiongjuan did not think Duan Lingtian was an eminent celestial. How could someone who had just become an eminent celestial possess strength comparable to a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial? Yang Jinxing shuddered when he recalled how this person had addressed his senior granduncle. He did not dare to underestimate this skinny young man, just because of his ordinary appearance. Senior granduncle. What Yang Xiongjuan called the skinny young man next almost scared Yang Jinxing out of his wits. His senior granduncle had addressed this young man as senior granduncle? Did this mean this young man's seniority was 4 generations higher than his? Who is he? Soon after, the young man's eyes landed on Yang Jinxing as he scrutinized him. Yang Jinxing felt as though he had nowhere to hide when faced with the young man's gaze. It was as though there were no secrets in front of the young man. Greetings, senior. Senior. Yang Jinxing. When Yang Jinxing thought about the young man's seniority, he was so frightened that his body trembled slightly. He wanted to greet the young man, but he quickly realized he did not know how to address the young man. The young man was his senior granduncle's senior granduncle. How should he address the young man? Senior granduncle, he's the disciple of my junior nephew, Liao Naijiang. He's also the current patriarch of the Human Devil clan. Yang Xiongjuan replied to the young man in a timely manner. So you're the current patriarch of the Human Devil clan, Yang Jinxing. I've heard of you. The young man nodded. He could tell Yang Jinxing was at a loss, so he said indifferently, my surname is Xia. You can call me Senior Xia. Greetings, Senior Xia. Yang Jinxing sighed in relief when he heard the young man's words. He quickly bowed respectfully at the young man. Senior granduncle is one of the only 2 6 tribulation bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan. Yang Xiongjuan reminded Yang Jinxing through voice transmission. 6 tribulation bodiless celestial? Hearing Yang Xiongjuan's words, Yang Jinxing was shocked and couldn't recover for a long time. Why's he here? The young man asked with a slight frown on his face as he looked at Yang Xiongjuan. After all, this was a place where the bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan cultivated. Apart from bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan, they were not allowed to enter. Even the patriarch of the Human Devil clan was not an exception. The patriarch of the Human Devil clan held a lofty position in the eyes of ordinary human devils. However, in the eyes of the bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan, the patriarch of the Human Devil clan was just an insignificant junior. Senior granduncle, it's like this. Yang Xiongjuan did not dare to dawdle when he saw the displeasure on his senior granduncle's face. He quickly recounted everything that had happened. Finally, he looked at Yang Jinxing and added, in order to prove what he said is true, he swore on the lightning penalty oath. Currently, Duan Lingtian was unaware that Duan Lingtian's actions had caused a commotion in the Wandering Saint Palace. Duan Lingtian's actions in the Wandering Saint Palace had alerted many bodiless celestials in the Human Devil clan. However, now that Duan Lingtian had returned to the upper province, he was completely dumbfounded when he heard about this matter. The successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the successor of the first absolute of the 7 absolute sect? Senior Feng Qingyang is the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 absolute sect? Duan Lingtian could still remember. Chapter 2340. When Duan Lingtian received the inheritance of the Supreme Sword Dao Mental Cultivation Method, Sovereign Heart Sword, left behind by Sword Saint Feng Qingyang, he became Feng Qingyang's successor. At the same time, he succeeded Feng Qingyang and became the new successor of the Misty Rain sect. In the past, although Duan Lingtian knew he had become the successor of the Misty Rain progeny, he had no idea what the title meant. Now that he had come to the upper province and heard about the 7 absolute sect and the rumors about the 7 absolute sect, he had just learned that, as it turned out, the successor of the Misty Rain wasn't an ordinary title. It was both a supreme honor and a heavy responsibility. The Misty Rain lineage was the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. The successor of the Misty Rain sect in each generation was the sect leader of the Seven Absolutes sect. As long as the successor of the Misty Rain sect did not appear, the Seven Absolutes sect would not have a sect master. This was the iron law of the Seven Absolutes sect. I didn't expect. After learning about the Seven Absolutes sect and the successor of the Fog Rain sect, Duan Lingtian could not help but shake his head. His face was filled with shock, and he was still in a daze. Previously, when he was still in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, and had yet to be sent back to the lower province, he had only heard rumors about the Sword Saint, Feng Qingyang. However, he had never heard of the Seven Absolutes sect before. Only now did he know. As it turned out, there was such an ancient sect in the Dao Martial Saint Land. Moreover, this sect had once suppressed Zoroastrianism, Zhuangzi Buddhism, and the Heaven Divination sect until they could not even lift their heads. The Seven Absolutes sect was so powerful during Senior Feng Qingyang's era. Although Duan Lingtian had yet to regain his senses, he could not help but feel his blood boiling when he learned about the Seven Absolutes sect's past. It was as if he had completely immersed himself in the glorious days of the Seven Invincible sect. That era was not only the era of the Sword Saint Feng Qingyang, but it was also the era of the Seven Absolutes sect. I remember that when I was still in Windfall Nation in the lower province, I heard the sect leader of Drift Blaze sect, who's also Tian Wu's master, mention the Seven Absolutes sect. However, at that time, I've never heard of the Seven Absolutes sect. She must have seen the 10,000 Swords territory and thought of the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect, the Fog Rain successor. After all, my myriad sword domain came from the successor of the Misty Rain sect, Senior Feng Qingyang. Now that he recalled some of the past, Duan Lingtian also came to a realization. It seems like the sect leader of Windfall Nation's Drift Blaze sect should be a member of the Seven Absolutes sect as well. Moreover, it's very likely that she's the previous successor of the Blazing Phoenix progeny, the fifth absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. After all, her direct disciple Tian Wu is the current successor of the Blazing Phoenix progeny, the fifth absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. When Duan Lingtian returned to the upper province and heard the news of the Seven Absolutes sect's reappearance, he learned about the achievements of the current successors of the Seven Absolutes sect in the upper province. This included the achievements of Feng Tianwu, his soulmate whom he had been dreaming of. Feng Tianwu, the current successor of the Blazing Phoenix progeny, the fifth absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect, had killed the White Tiger King from Zhuangzi Buddhism. She was ranked 11th on the Supreme Saint ranking. The White Tiger King was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. Since Tian Wu was able to kill him a few years ago, this means she was already stronger than an ordinary powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. I can't believe Tian Wu obtained such a great fortuitous encounter and became so powerful after coming to the upper province. All this while, Duan Lingtian had been searching for Feng Tianwu. During the process of searching for Feng Tianwu, he was extremely worried about Feng Tianwu's safety, and he was deeply afraid that something had happened to Feng Tianwu. If something happened to Feng Tianwu, not only would he not be able to accept it, but he would also not be able to explain himself to his uncle Feng Wu Dao. When Duan Lingtian learned about Feng Tianwu, he could not help but sigh in relief. At the very least, he was certain Tian Wu was safe. When Duan Lingtian heaved a sigh of relief, he felt happy for her from the bottom of his heart when he thought about her current achievements. I didn't expect Tian Wu to be a member of the Seven Absolutes sect just like me. At the same time, Duan Lingtian, who found out he was the successor of the Seven Absolutes sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, sighed emotionally when he thought about how he and Tian Wu had unknowingly become disciples of the Seven Absolutes sect. Of course, after this exclamation, Duan Lingtian sighed again. Also, I didn't expect Xuanai to become a member of the Seven Absolutes sect. The Xuanai that Duan Lingtian was referring to was naturally Han Xuanai, the eldest miss of the Debussy subterranean Greenwave Han mansion. She was also someone Duan Lingtian had known since a long time ago, and had always regarded her as his own little sister. Duan Lingtian had already found out about Xuanai leaving the Greenwave Han mansion when he was still in the lower province. However, he had never expected that. He did not expect Xuanai to achieve so much in the upper province after leaving the Greenwave Han mansion. Han Xuanai, the successor of the Red Dust progeny, the seventh absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, killed sect leader Su of Zhuangzi Buddhism the moment she was born, and was ranked in the top 20 of the Supreme Saint ranking. This was the news that Duan Lingtian had heard. Sect leader Su of Zhuangzi Buddhism was at the seventh form of the Saint Celestial stage. After so many years, Xuanai is already strong enough to kill him. Duan Lingtian was shocked. At this moment, Duan Lingtian could not help but recall the time when he first met Han Xuanai. The young girl from back then had unknowingly grown to such a shocking level. Duan Lingtian felt happy for Han Xuanai from the bottom of his heart. Then he sighed emotionally. There are only 7 absolutes in the Seven Absolutes sect. Currently, apart from myself, the people I know, including myself, are 6 of the 7 absolutes. Isn't this a little too exaggerated? Why do I feel like all of this was deliberately arranged by someone? Duan Lingtian could not help but think this way. Apart from the mysterious successor of the prophet progeny, who was a heaven-defying Dao cultivator, Duan Lingtian knew the other 5 absolutes in the Seven Absolutes sect. Feng Tianwu and Han Xuanai. They were the successors of the Blazing Phoenix progeny and the Red Dust progeny, the 5th absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. Guli, the successor of the Kratos progeny, the 3rd absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. Yu Wuing, the successor of the Dark Shadow progeny, the 4th absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. Nangong Chun and Nangong Yi, the successors of the Didymus progeny, the 6th absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. Apart from Feng Tianwu and Han Xuanai, Duan Lingtian also knew Guli, Yu Wuing, Nangong Chun and Nangong Yi. I can't believe senior brother Guli is also a member of the Seven Absolutes sect, the successor of the 3rd absolute, the Kratos progeny. It seems like the matter he said he was going to do after leaving Zoroastrianism has something to do with the Seven Absolutes sect. Naturally, Duan Lingtian was no stranger to Guli. He was a friend he had made in the Debussy subterranean. Later on, they came to the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land and joined one of the 3 great sects of the Dao Martial Saint Land, the Zoroastrianism. However, Guli had left Zoroastrianism a few years ago. According to what he said in the past, he had a very important matter to attend to. It was not difficult for Duan Lingtian to figure out Guli's current identity. The matter Guli was going to do after leaving Zoroastrianism was most likely related to the Seven Absolutes sect, or the Kratos progeny, the 3rd absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. Senior brother Guli's current strength is not bad. His current cultivation base should be at the 7th form of the Saint Celestial stage or above. Currently, Guli was not as famous as Feng Tianwu and Han Xuanai in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. However, as the successor of the Kratos progeny, the 3rd absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, he had attracted the attention of many people in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land after a few battles. For this reason, Duan Lingtian learned about the Seven Absolute sect when he returned to the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. The current successor of the Kratos progeny, the 3rd absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, was none other than Guli. And Yu Wuing, isn't he father's subordinate? How did he suddenly become the successor of the Dark Shadow progeny, the 4th absolute of the Seven Absolute sect? Duan Lingtian was confused when he found out Yu Wuing was the successor of the Dark Shadow progeny, the 4th absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. Although he did not have much contact with Yu Wuing, he had heard of him before. He knew Yu Wuing was a capable person by his father's side. In fact, when he was in the Azure Cloud Mansion, many people said Yu Wuing was like his father, Duan Rufing's shadow. Don't tell me Yu Wuing is someone else. Is he not father's subordinate? Duan Lingtian muttered to himself with a frown on his face. No, How can there be such a coincidence in this world? Father's subordinate, Yu Wuing, is skilled in the Tao of assassination, and the successor of the Dark Shadow progeny, the fourth absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, is also skilled in the Tao of assassination. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Yu Wuing, the successor of the Dark Shadow progeny, the fourth absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. A few years ago, he successfully assassinated a high priest at the seventh form of the Saint Celestial stage from the Heaven Divination sect. Duan Lingtian learned about this when he heard about it. Yu Wuing, the successor of the Dark Shadow progeny, the fourth absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, was skilled in the Tao of assassination, just like his father Duan Rufeng. Back then, when Feng Qingyang was still around, the Seven Absolute sect had suppressed the three great sects so much that they could not even lift their heads. When Feng Qingyang ascended, most of the successors of the absolutes in the Seven Absolute sect had ascended as well. Due to that, the Seven Absolute sect was faced with a shortage of successors. Due to that, the three great sects launched a counterattack on them, causing them to suffer heavy losses. They were almost annihilated at one point. This was also the reason the Seven Absolute sect had almost disappeared from the Tao Martial Saint land. The three great sects would send out powerhouses to annihilate anyone who obtained information about the Seven Absolute sect. They wanted to completely annihilate the Seven Absolute sect to avenge their humiliation. Apart from wanting to avenge their humiliation, they were also worried that another monstrous genius like Feng Qingyang would appear in the Seven Absolute sect and lead the Seven Absolute sect to a new height of glory, suppressing the three great sects again. For this reason, countless people from the Seven Absolute sect had died in the hands of the three great sections. I've accepted the Sovereign Heart Sword's legacy left behind by Senior Feng Qingyang and become the successor of the Misty Rain progeny. Although I accepted the legacy without knowing anything about the Seven Absolute sect, it also means I've accepted the responsibility of being the successor of the Misty Rain progeny. Since he had accepted the legacy left behind by the Sword Saint Feng Qingyang and became the successor of the Misty Rain progeny, naturally, Duan Lingtian did not plan to ignore his responsibilities as the successor of the Misty Rain progeny. Now that I'm the successor of the Misty Rain progeny, I'm also the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. As the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, I'll have to settle the score with the three great sects. The moment Duan Lingtian thought of this, his eyes gleamed coldly as though he was about to devour someone. Although the cold gleam in Duan Lingtian's eyes was not directed at the three women in the room, they could not help but feel chills running up their spines when they saw Duan Lingtian's gaze from the side. The entire room fell silent immediately. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop on the floor. What a coincidence! I've returned to the upper province to look for Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, to avenge Hua Lao. I'll start with Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, to repay the blood debt the three great sects owe the Seven Absolute sect. The flames of hatred in Duan Lingtian's eyes intensified. He had decided to do something for the Seven Absolute sect before he ascended to the Devata realm. He wanted to annihilate the three great sects. As the successor of the Misty Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, and the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, it was his duty. Let's return to Zoroastrianism. At the same time, Duan Lingtian stood up hastily and said to the three women. Since they could sense Duan Lingtian's anxiousness, the three women did not say anything. They immediately stood up and left the room with Duan Lingtian. They walked through the lobby and out of the restaurant. They were about to leave when Duan Lingtian and the others walked past the bustling main hall. Many people's eyes were on Ke and Gan Ruyen. This was because the two women were too dazzling. A peerless face and a perfect figure. The moment she appeared, it seemed to cause everything around her to be overshadowed by her. Most importantly, the two women looked exactly the same. Two peerless beauties who looked exactly the same, but had different temperaments. No matter where they went, they would always be an eye-catching scenery. When Duan Lingtian sensed the unbridled gazes that were directed at him, he could not help but stop in his tracks. He snorted coldly. This cold snort seemed to be flat. Yet when it entered into the ears of all the customers in the restaurant, it was like a thunderclap that shocked them to the point their souls trembled. Chapter 2342. His cold aura swept out, causing everyone in the restaurant to feel as though their hearts and souls had been frozen. This was especially true for the male customers who were looking at Kerr and Gan Ruyen. They felt the cold aura even more keenly. They hurriedly retracted their unbridled gazes. After retracting their gazes, they instinctively turned to look at the purple-clad figure walking in front of them. The purple-clad figure was tall and had long hair that fluttered in the wind. However, the cold aura he exuded seemed to be able to freeze the air. At this moment, the entire restaurant fell silent. It was only when the purple-clad young man led the group of 4 out of the restaurant that the customers in the restaurant regained their senses. When they came back to their senses, their faces were filled with relief, as if they had just survived a calamity. How terrifying! That purple-clad young man is too terrifying. That's right. He didn't even look at us. Just the cold aura that emanated from his body made me feel as if my heart had been frozen. At that moment, I almost couldn't feel my own heartbeat. I feel the same way. Not only did I feel as though my heart had been frozen, but I also felt as though my soul had been frozen as well. At that moment, my consciousness seemed to have become blurry. I even felt as though I was about to die. What kind of powerhouse is that purple-clad young man? Just the cold aura he exuded was already so terrifying. If he makes a move, how earth-shattering would it be? After Duan Lingtian led Kerr, Duan Xiling, and Gan Ruyen out of the restaurant, the customers in the restaurant could not help but discuss among themselves. Most of them had a look of relief on their faces. At the same time, a thunderous voice suddenly resonated from outside the restaurant. "Brat, it's your daughter's fortune that my master has taken a liking to her innate talent. If you're smart, quickly ask your daughter to kowtow and acknowledge my master as her master." This cold shout was filled with the smell of gunpowder, and it instantly attracted the attention of the customers in the restaurant. After a short while, some of the customers began to leave the restaurant to watch the commotion. Naturally, most of the customers continued to stay in the restaurant and did not join in the commotion. It's that purple-clad young man. Someone has taken a liking to his daughter. That young girl who's about 12 or 13 years old is actually his daughter. That young girl looks very similar to that pair of beautiful women. It seems like that pair of beautiful women are his wives. He's a winner in life. Regardless of whether he's a winner in life or not, he seems to have encountered some trouble. Amidst the clamor, the remaining customers in the restaurant's lobby paid their bills and left the restaurant one after another, arriving outside the restaurant. Soon, outside the entrance of the restaurant, they saw the group of people who had just passed by the restaurant's lobby. There was a purple-clothed youth, a pair of peerlessly beautiful twin sisters, and a peerlessly beautiful young girl. She was leaning against the purple-clad young man and said, "Father, they're so annoying." The young girl was referring to was a group of 3 people standing opposite them. The group of 3 people was led by a skinny old man. The old man had white hair and white eyebrows. He wore a brocade robe that accentuated his extraordinary temperament. With just a glance, one could tell he was not an ordinary person. Behind him stood 2 plainly dressed middle-aged men. One of the middle-aged men was skinny and stood there like a bamboo pole. The other middle-aged man was tall and sturdy. He took a step forward and stared at Duan Lingtian with his huge eyes. Waves of aura swept out from his body, trying to oppress Duan Lingtian. The cold shout that was filled with the smell of gunpowder earlier was also from this person. What's going on? I don't know. I just came out as well. It seems like the old man in brocade robes took a fancy to the young girl next to the purple-clad young man and wanted to take her as his disciple. However, the purple-clad young man rejected him. The young girl next to the purple-clad young man is his daughter. According to the young girl, it's enough that she has her father to teach her. She doesn't need any teacher or master. At the same time, the group of people who came out to join in the fun also realized what was going on. Scram! Duan Lingtian's expression darkened when he heard the burly middle-aged man's cold shout. He glanced at the other party coldly and spoke indifferently. He had intended to rush back to Zoroastrianism. However, he did not expect to be stopped as soon as he stepped out of the restaurant. It was fine if he was stopped by someone. After all, the other party had taken a fancy to his daughter's innate talent and wanted to take his daughter as his disciple. It was understandable. As the saying went, everyone has the heart to love talent. However, what infuriated him was this. After he expressed that he was not interested in his daughter becoming the other party's disciple, the other party's servant actually threatened him. Whoosh! When the old man in brocade robes heard Duan Lingtian telling him to scram, his calm expression changed. The burly middle-aged man behind him looked at Duan Lingtian, as though he had just seen a ghost. Boy, you dared to tell me to scram. Do you know with my strength, it's as easy as killing a chicken for me to kill you? When the burly middle-aged man reached the end of his sentence, his voice turned colder and colder. When the burly middle-aged man's words spread, the people in the surroundings felt as though they had fallen into an ice cellar. A mere cultivator at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage dares to say it's as easy as killing a chicken for him? Duan Lingtian sneered. In the next instant, Duan Lingtian's figure flashed before the crowd could even react to the situation. Whoosh! In the next moment, Duan Lingtian had already appeared in front of the burly middle-aged man like a ghost. He stretched out his hand like an iron clamp, and before the burly middle-aged man could even react, Duan Lingtian had already grabbed his neck and lifted him up. Duan Lingtian was about the same height as the burly middle-aged man, but he was slightly slimmer. However, when Duan Lingtian grabbed the burly middle-aged man's neck and lifted him off the ground, it did not look right. 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage? The purple-clad young man said the burly middle-aged man is at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. How's that possible? A cultivator at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage is a force to be reckoned with in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Not only that, but the burly middle-aged man is only a servant of the finely dressed old man. I think it's impossible as well. I think the purple-clad young man wants to use the burly middle-aged man to show off his strength. That's why he said the burly middle-aged man's cultivation base is at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. That's possible. Although Duan Lingtian said the burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage, no one believed him. However, apart from the people around him and the burly middle-aged man, no one believed what he said. They all thought that he was exaggerating. In the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, there were very few cultivators at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. At the very least, there were only about 10 people at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage on the Supreme Saint ranking. Although the city they were in was bustling, it was not considered a big city in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. It was rare to even see a powerhouse at the 3rd form of the Saint Celestial stage, let alone a powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. However, there were some people who knew the burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. For example, the finely dressed old man and the skinny middle-aged man standing behind the finely dressed old man. At this moment, he saw Duan Lingtian appearing out of thin air in front of his companion and grabbing his companion's neck with one hand before lifting him up. Most importantly, his companion did not seem to have any strength to fight back at all. The skinny middle-aged man was stunned. "You, who are you?" the finely dressed old man asked coldly as he looked at Duan Lingtian with a piercing gaze. Bang! Duan Lingtian casually tossed the burly middle-aged man to the ground before he returned to Duan Xiling's side. He looked at the finely dressed old man calmly before he said indifferently, Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, the successor of the Fog Rain sect, 7 Absolute sect. 7 Absolute sect. The successor of the Fog Rain sect. The finely dressed old man's eyes widened when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. Even the skinny middle-aged man standing behind the finely dressed old man, the burly middle-aged man who was tossed aside by Duan Lingtian, and the others present on the scene looked at Duan Lingtian in shock and disbelief. This purple-clad young man was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute sect. In recent years, the 7 Absolute sect had been the hottest topic in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Very few people would talk about the Seven Absolutes sect without mentioning it. Up until now, apart from the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, all the successors of the Seven Absolutes sect's Seven Absolutes had appeared. For this reason, everyone in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land was curious about the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. They were curious about what kind of person he was, what kind of cultivation base he had, and how strong he was. Most of the people present on the scene were curious as well. However, they did not expect that the successor of the Fog Rain progeny would appear. One day, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect, would appear before their eyes. The people present on the scene were still in shock over Duan Lingtian's identity as the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. I was wondering when an eminent celestial like you appeared in the upper province of the Martial Saint Land. As it turns out, you're the current successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the sect leader of the Seven Absolutes sect. Chapter 2343. Based on the finely clad old man's words, it was obvious he had seen through Duan Lingtian's current cultivation base, through Duan Lingtian's attack. An eminent celestial. However, based on his tone, one could tell he was not afraid of Duan Lingtian. Although he knew Duan Lingtian was an eminent celestial, he did not seem to be afraid of Duan Lingtian at all. Moreover, he did not reveal any other emotions. Based on his calm expression, it was as though he did not think Duan Lingtian was a threat at all. Although the finely dressed old man was able to remain calm when he saw Duan Lingtian was an eminent celestial, it did not mean others could remain calm as well. The successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the sect leader of the Seven Absolutes sect, is actually an eminent celestial? The moment the brocade-robed old man finished speaking, the eyes of the bamboo-like middle-aged man standing behind him could not help but violently shrink. His thin face was filled with shock. The burly middle-aged man who was sent flying by Duan Lingtian and had just managed to get up from the ground trembled violently when he heard the finely dressed old man's words. At this moment he felt chills running down his spine. No wonder my saint origin couldn't break through the shackles of his energy, even after I exerted all my strength earlier. As it turns out, he's an eminent celestial. In that case, everything that happened just now can be explained. The burly middle-aged man was shocked when he found out the purple-clad young man he had provoked was an eminent celestial. Fear still lingered in his heart. Fortunately, he didn't kill me. Otherwise, I would have died. The burly middle-aged man was relieved when he thought about this. He was only a martial cultivator at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. An eminent celestial could kill him as easily as killing a chicken. When the burly middle-aged man recalled what he had said to the purple-clad young man, he could not help but blush. How could he kill the purple-clad young man as easily as killing a chicken? The other party could kill him as easily as killing a chicken. The two middle-aged servants by the old man's side were already so shocked when they heard the old man's words, let alone the crowd of onlookers present. Half-step celestial? Did I hear wrongly? He said. Half-step immortal. After the crowd of onlookers came back to their senses one after another, one of them took the lead and asked in surprise. He even suspected that he had misheard. You didn't hear wrongly. He did say eminent celestial. Soon many people followed to confirm. He said the successor of the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect, the sect leader of the Seven Absolutes sect, is an eminent celestial? That's right. It's no wonder the Seven Absolutes sect's Misty Rain successor was so fast. I didn't even catch a glimpse of him when he arrived in front of the burly middle-aged man. It was too fast. If he's a half-step immortal, it's only natural for him to possess such speed. If he's an eminent celestial, he shouldn't be lying, right? He said the burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. Put aside the fact that he's an eminent celestial, his identity as the successor of the Seven Absolutes sect's Misty Rain successor, and the sect leader of the Seven Absolutes sect wouldn't lie. Moreover, with his identity, he wouldn't lie. Does this mean the burly middle-aged man is really a powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. As the crowd discussed among themselves, they realized they had been overthinking things. The burly middle-aged man was most likely a powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. It was only natural that a powerhouse at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage would not be able to withstand a single blow from an eminent celestial. An eminent celestial? I've only heard of such a powerhouse before. This is my first time seeing one. Me too. I didn't expect the current successor of the 7 Absolute Sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, to be an eminent celestial. Moreover, he looks so young. It's understandable. The strongest female disciples in the 7 Absolute Sect are suspected to have broken through to the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage. As the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, and the sect leader of the 7 Absolute Sect, it would be strange if he's not an eminent celestial. Indeed, when the group of people discussed animatedly again, their gazes landed on Duan Ling Tian in unison. They stared fixedly at Duan Ling Tian, as though they wanted to imprint this person deeply in their minds and engrave him in their hearts. An old woman suddenly exclaimed, "Isn't he Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism? Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism?" As the old woman took the lead to speak, more and more people began to carefully size up Duan Ling Tian's face. Gradually, they began to feel that Duan Ling Tian looked familiar. Memories from a few years ago began to surface in their minds. He's indeed Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. I've seen his portrait before. I've seen his portrait as well. However, that was a few years ago. I didn't recall it earlier. No wonder I thought he looked familiar. As it turns out, he's Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. Apart from that, when he revealed his identity earlier, apart from saying he's the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute Sect, he also said his name is Duan Ling Tian. He did say his name is Duan Ling Tian. This, Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism from a few years ago, has become the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute Sect? Isn't this a little too big? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. As more and more people recognized Duan Ling Tian's handsome face, they began to realize something. Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism from a few years ago, and the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute Sect, were the same person. Aren't the 7 Absolute Sect and Zoroastrianism sworn enemies? That's right. Not only is the 7 Absolute Sect sworn enemies with Zoroastrianism, but it's also sworn enemies with Zhuangzi Buddhism and the Heaven Divination sect. Why would the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute Sect, be the guardian of Zoroastrianism? Many people were puzzled by this. All of you are really stupid. Can't Duan Ling Tian, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute Sect, join Zoroastrianism as a spy to gather information about Zoroastrianism? If that's the case, it makes sense. Many people who were puzzled by Duan Ling Tian's identity as the sect leader of Zoroastrianism and a member of the 7 Absolute Sect were instantly enlightened. However, isn't Duan Ling Tian's improvement in strength a little too exaggerated? At this moment someone said, I think. A few years ago, he defeated Hao Shuang, the strongest person below the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage in the Dao Martial Saint Land. In just a few years, he had already become an eminent celestial? Isn't this a little too exaggerated? It's indeed a little exaggerated. Could it be that he's mistaken? For a moment, the gazes of everyone present fell on the old man in embroidered clothes in unison. Earlier, the finely dressed old man was the one who had said Duan Ling Tian was an eminent celestial. If the successor of the 7 Absolute Sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, possessed a cultivation base at the level of an eminent celestial, they would not be surprised, perplexed, or suspicious even though they were shocked. However, Duan Ling Tian, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute Sect, was no stranger to them at all. This was because he had become famous in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land a few years ago. He was Duan Lingtian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism, whose strength was second only to Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. In just a few years, Duan Lingtian, who had not even broken through to the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage, had become an eminent celestial. Was this possible? Was this realistic? Although the strongest person present on the scene was only at the 2nd form of the Saint Celestial stage, and had not experienced the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage, it was still possible. However, as the saying went, even if you haven't eaten pork, you've heard of how pigs run. For this reason, they knew how difficult it was to break through to the 9th form. As it turns out, your Duan Lingtian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism, who shook the upper province of the Tao Martial Saint land a few years ago, you're widely acknowledged as the strongest prodigy in the Tao Martial Saint land after Pei Si Hai. The brocade-robed old man ignored the skeptical gazes of the crowd. His gaze on Duan Lingtian turned colder and colder. It seems like you've been concealing your cultivation base a few years ago. That's why they thought you haven't even broken through to the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage, the brocade-robed old man continued to say. However, you can't hide your cultivation base from me. You're indeed an eminent celestial. The brocade-robed old man was infuriated when he saw Duan Lingtian, looking at him indifferently. Do you think you can stop me from taking your daughter as my disciple, just because you're an eminent celestial? Do you really think eminent celestials like you are the strongest in the mundane realms? The brocade-robed old man's words were filled with confidence. His words shocked everyone present into a daze. Eminent celestials, aren't they the strongest in the mundane realms? Why does it sound like eminent celestials aren't the strongest in the mundane realms? Many people were shocked. However, most of them thought the old man was spouting nonsense. At this moment, Duan Lingtian raised an eyebrow and said indifferently, "You're right." Chapter 2344. Previously, when Duan Lingtian had just walked out of the restaurant, his gaze had been attracted by the finely dressed old man who was walking towards him. This was because the finely dressed old man gave him a sense of familiarity. Previously, he had only felt this way from Liao Naijiang, a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. Naturally, Duan Lingtian was not certain the finely dressed old man was a bodiless celestial like Liao Naijiang. There were many reasons why he was certain the finely dressed old man was a bodiless celestial. First, it was because of the feeling he had earlier. Second, it was because of the two middle-aged servants by the finely dressed old man's side. The burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage, while the skinny middle-aged man was at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage. The finely dressed old man either had an extraordinary background or was at least an eminent celestial to be able to make such a person his servant. Third, the finely dressed old man had seen through Duan Lingtian's cultivation base as soon as he attacked the burly middle-aged man. Only an eminent celestial would be able to see through Duan Lingtian's cultivation base. Fourthly, the brocade-robed old man did not seem flustered at all after he revealed Duan Lingtian's cultivation base was that of an eminent celestial. This proved the finely dressed old man was not afraid of Duan Lingtian, even if he was an eminent celestial. In fact, this proved the finely dressed old man was at least a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. Otherwise, how could he be so confident? Fifth, only a three-tribulation bodiless celestial or above would be able to detect his daughter's innate talent through his divine consciousness. Based on all these factors, Duan Lingtian was certain the finely dressed old man was not an ordinary person. He was certain the finely dressed old man was a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. Do you really think I can't tell you're a bodiless celestial? For this reason, Duan Lingtian did not doubt the finely dressed old man's words. You know about bodiless celestials? Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, the finely dressed old man was slightly taken aback. He was surprised that Duan Lingtian knew about bodiless celestials. However, before Duan Lingtian could reply, the finely dressed old man nodded and said, "I almost forgot. Not only are you a guardian of Zoroastrianism, but you're also the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. You're the current sect leader of the Seven Absolutes sect." It's only natural you're aware of bodiless celestials. The finely dressed old man's words was not surprising. If I'm not mistaken, you're a three-tribulation bodiless celestial, right? The finely dressed old of the celestial stage had the finely dressed old as upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words. The finely dressed old man was not surprised at all. After all, only a three-tribulation bodiless celestial, or above, could look down on an eminent celestial. For this reason, he was not surprised that Duan Lingtian was able to guess that he was a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. Humph! My lord is a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. Right at this moment, the bamboo middle-aged man standing behind the old man in embroidered clothes spoke with a proud expression to Duan Lingtian. Four-tribulation bodiless celestial? Duan Lingtian's expression turned slightly solemn when he heard the middle-aged man's words. He could not help but shudder in his heart. If a four-tribulation bodiless celestial unleashes his full strength, he'll be able to tear a hole in the void. He's much stronger than a three-tribulation bodiless celestial. The finely dressed old man was the second bodiless celestial Duan Lingtian had encountered. If he was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, he would be much stronger than the three-tribulation bodiless celestial, Liao Naijiang. A smug smile appeared on the skinny man's face when he saw the solemn expression on Duan Lingtian's face after he spoke. In his opinion, Duan Lingtian was confident. He was certain this eminent celestial, the successor of the fog rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect, and the current sect leader of the seven absolute sect, would push his daughter out to be his lord's disciple. However, when he heard Duan Lingtian's words, the smile on his face froze. He even wondered if he was dreaming. Let's forget about what happened today. If you dare to be so aggressive, I'll kill you. Duan Lingtian said calmly, as he looked at the finely dressed old man indifferently. From the beginning until the end, he was not afraid at all when he learned the finely dressed old man was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. At this moment, he was in a hurry to return to the Zoroastrianism. He did not want to cause any trouble. Although this was a small matter to him, he was confident he could kill a mere four-tribulation bodiless celestial. However, if it was possible, he did not want to kill the finely dressed old man. After all, the finely dressed old man was a human, a bodiless celestial. When the devil clans invaded the upper province in the future, human bodiless celestials would be the backbone of the human race. It would be a great loss to the human race if he killed the finely dressed old man. For this reason, Duan Lingtian had made up his mind. If the finely dressed old man was not aggressive, he would not make a move. He planned to let the finely dressed old man live. How dare you? How dare you? As soon as Duan Lingtian's words left his mouth, the bamboo-skinned middle-aged man and the burly middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. Then, they shouted at Duan Lingtian in unison. Stop! If you dare to be aggressive again, I'll kill you. They did not expect Duan Lingtian would dare to provoke them. They did not expect Duan Lingtian to be so arrogant after finding out their master was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. How dare a mere eminent celestial overturn the heavens? When the bamboo-clad middle-aged man and the burly middle-aged man shouted at Duan Lingtian in unison, the finely dressed old man was so enraged that his body began to tremble violently. His expression had turned completely grave. Duan Lingtian, it seems like although you're the successor of the seven absolute sect's first absolute, the fog rain progeny, and you know about bodiless celestials, you don't know about the levels of bodiless celestials. The finely dressed old man who was enraged and filled with killing intent said coldly, Fine. Before you die today, I'll let you understand the levels of bodiless celestials. Two tribulation bodiless celestials are as strong as eminent celestials like you. Three tribulation bodiless celestials are stronger than eminent celestials. Four tribulation bodiless celestials like me are stronger than three tribulation bodiless celestials. If I make a move, I'll be able to tear a hole in the void. If I find the right place, I'll be able to tear a hole in the void and travel between the upper and lower province of the Tao Martial Saint Land. The finely dressed old man revealed the strength of a four tribulation bodiless celestial. Before I die, Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes when he heard the finely dressed old man's words. Based on the finely dressed old man's words, Duan Lingtian knew the finely dressed old man wanted to kill him. The finely dressed old man was determined to kill him. 2 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial? 3 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial? 4 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial? What's a bodiless celestial? Why are there so many levels? As soon as the finely dressed old man finished speaking, his robe fluttered as he prepared to make a move on Duan Lingtian. The onlookers began to discuss among themselves when they heard the finely dressed old man's words. Did he say that a 3 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial is stronger than an eminent celestial? I heard that as well. Moreover, he said he's a 4 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial, so he's even stronger than a 3 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial. Moreover, he can tear a hole in the void, and tear a hole in the void to travel between the upper and lower province. Based on what he said, is he even human? That's the ability of a celestial, right? At the same time, the group of onlookers was inexplicably shocked as they recalled the words of the brocade-robed old man. They did not know about bodiless celestials. In fact, they had never even heard of bodiless celestials before this. Elementary Devouring Tactic. Duan Lingtian instantly cast the assist-type divine ability, the Elementary Devouring Tactic, when he sensed the finely dressed old man was about to make a move. Swoosh! A whirlpool appeared and overlapped with Duan Lingtian, as it emitted a devouring force. In just a blink of an eye, the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surroundings was completely devoured by him. As expected of the upper province, the heaven and earth spirit energy here is much richer than the lower province. In just a blink of an eye, the Elementary Devouring Tactic that I cast has reached its limit. After about a breath, Duan Lingtian could clearly feel the celestial origin energy in his body had risen to its peak state. If he unleashed his full strength, he could even tear a hole in the void that would take 30 minutes to heal. The finely dressed old man, a 4 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial, was the first to notice the change in the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surroundings. He looked at Duan Lingtian and sneered. Your assist-type divine ability is pretty good. You managed to absorb the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surroundings. However, do you think an assist-type divine ability like you, an eminent celestial, is comparable to a 4 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial like me? Today, I, Cheni Ru, a 4 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial, 2345, shall kill the successor of the 7 absolute first absolute, the fog rain lineage, the finely dressed old man, seen in tens of thousands of glared years. At Duan Lingtian. This was not a secret to the people in the Dao Martial Saint Land. My name will go down in history. This was because the 7 absolute sect would only enter the world the 7 when the successor of the fog rain progeny is hard to come by. The first absolute before the crowd could recover from the shock of seeing the heaven and earth spirit energy. Every generation surrounding leader of the 7 absolute sect. They heard Chun was the successor of the Misty Rain sect. At this moment, they realized what was going on. The successor of the Misty Rain sect did not appear. A 4 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial was going to make his move. A leader. So what if a masterless sect entered the world? In the end, they were like a sheet of loose sand. Due to this reason, when the 7 Absolute sect entered the upper province a few years ago, the people in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land were aware of the situation. The successor of the first absolute of the 7 Absolute sect, the Fog Rain progeny, must have been born. Ever since then, everyone in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, including most of the people present on the scene, was curious. Who was the successor of the 7 Absolute sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny? However, the successor of the 7 Absolute sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, had appeared before everyone. At the same time, they learned that, as it turned out, they had heard of the current successor of the 7 Absolute sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny. However, he had another identity at that time. Protector of Zoroastrianism, Duan Lingtian. He said he's a 4 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial. He's even stronger than a 3 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial, who's stronger than an eminent celestial. I wonder if he's just bragging. When the crowd saw Chunyi Ru, a 4 Tribulation Bodiless Celestial, they could not help but mutter to themselves. Now the atmosphere was extremely tense, and it was completely silent. Therefore, this person's murmur clearly entered the ears of everyone present, and it was especially piercing to the ears. Humph. Almost at the same time, Chun Ru, who was about to attack Duan Lingtian, paused slightly, and then let out a cold snort. Puchi. Accompanying the cold snort was the faint sound of something being penetrated. The next moment, bang! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the person who had been muttering earlier fell to the ground and crashed heavily, kicking up a cloud of dust. When he fell, his eyes were still wide open. He died with a grievance. In between his eyebrows, there was a hideous and terrifying bloody hole. Blood was still gushing out from it like a fountain. Just looking at it made people feel cold all over, and their hair stand on end. Hiss! 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 Immediately everyone present gasped. When they looked at Chun Ru again, their eyes were full of fear and dread. Just because he casually said something about him, he was killed by him. From the beginning to the end, they didn't even see how Chun Ru killed the person lying on the ground. As expected of a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, with just a casual glance, a beam of light shot out of his eyes is comparable to the full-powered attack of an eminent celestial. Among those present on the scene, only Duan Lingtian had seen how Chun Ru killed the person. A beam of light shot out of his eyes and pierced the person's glabella, killing him instantly. With this as an example, no one dared to say anything even if they doubted Chun Ru's strength. They only dared to think about it in their hearts or communicate through voice transmissions with their friends. At this moment, the atmosphere turned even quieter. Although Chun Ru had killed the person, the people present on the scene still had no idea how strong he was. After all, even if a powerhouse at the seventh form of the Saint Celestial stage, or above made a move, they would not be able to catch a trace of it. Therefore, most people still doubted whether Chun Ru's strength was as strong as he had said. We'll find out soon enough if he's as strong as he says. The battle between him and Duan Lingtian, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect, is imminent. Let's fight. Let's fight. Let's see how strong Duan Lingtian is since he's already an eminent celestial. Although the people present on the scene did not dare to speak recklessly, they could not help but mutter inwardly. Everyone's eyes were trained on Duan Lingtian and Chun Ru. One of them was the former guardian of the Zoroastrianism, the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the seven absolute sect. He was also the current sect leader of the seven absolute sect. The other person was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, who claimed his strength was much stronger than an eminent celestial. Was the latter boasting shamelessly? Once the two of them fought, the outcome of the battle would be revealed. From today onward, Duan Lingtian no longer exists in the mundane realm, Chun Ru said coldly as he shifted his gaze to Duan Lingtian. His robes fluttered in the air. The rolling power was like a storm that wreaked havoc around his body, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Shameless boasting. Duan Lingtian smiled contemptuously when he heard Chun Ru's words. His celestial origin energy, that had been boosted by the elementary devouring tactic, surged out of his body through his 99 saint veins. His celestial origin energy was mixed with his saint origin. If it was not for the fact that Duan Lingtian had not held back, the celestial origin energy and saint origin energy that surged out of his body would have been enough to tear the void apart. You'll find out soon enough if I'm boasting shamelessly or not, Chun Ru sneered. The moment he raised his hands, the power that swept out from his body surged again. It was like a layer of waves in the sea that soared into the sky. Chun Ru stood there with his back against a wave of energy. He was like a deity, carrying with him a seemingly endless divine might. Today I, Chun Ru, will kill Duan Lingtian, the sect leader of the seven absolute sect. At the same time, Chun Ru's arms shook violently. At this moment, the energy behind him that was like a raging wave began to shrink rapidly. In the end, it transformed into a thick and heavy saber that was extremely solid. The gigantic saber was formed by the energy surging out of Chun Ru's body. It emitted an oppressive aura. It was as though a primordial ferocious beast was sleeping in the gigantic saber and would wake up at any moment. At Chun Ru's current cultivation base, weapons in the mundane realm, including the Super Saint weapons on the 10 Great Saint weapons ranking, would not be of much help to him. Not only would they not be of much help to him, but they would also be a burden to him. A mere 4 tribulation bodiless celestial dares to act so arrogantly in front of me, Duan Lingtian? Today, I'll show you that even if I'm only an eminent celestial, I won't need more than 10 moves to defeat you. Upon hearing Chen Yiru's words, Duan Lingtian's eyes turned cold as he sneered. As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, the energy that surged out of his body had already transformed into hundreds and thousands of white sword rays that hovered around his body. At this moment, it seemed as though Duan Lingtian was surrounded by a rain of swords. However, this rain of swords was under his control. They revolved around him continuously, like agile dragons swimming in the air. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew, causing Duan Lingtian's purple robes to flutter. Duan Lingtian stood with his hands clasped behind his back, as he looked at Chen Yiru contemptuously. A hint of disdain could be seen on the corners of his mouth. It was as though he did not take Chen Yiru seriously at all. In fact, Duan Lingtian did not take Chen Yiru seriously at all. Previously, when Duan Lingtian was still in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, he had learned about bodiless celestials and the strength of bodiless celestials. At the same time, he knew Chen Yiru was not weak at all. With his current strength, he was comparable to a 5 tribulation bodiless celestial, or even a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial. With such confidence, how could he take a mere 4 tribulation bodiless celestial seriously? However, Chen Yiru, the 4 tribulation bodiless celestial, was oblivious to Duan Lingtian's thoughts. Otherwise, he would not have dared to act arrogantly in front of Duan Lingtian, even if he was given 100 guts. You won't need more than 10 moves to defeat me? Chen Yiru was taken aback when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. When he regained his senses, a furious expression appeared on his face as he said, Duan Lingtian, I'd like to see how you're going to defeat me in 10 moves. Chen Yiru, will only need 3 moves to kill you. As soon as Chen Yiru finished speaking, he made his move again. He stood motionless on the spot, but the thick and heavy saber in his hands that was formed entirely from the energy that surged out of his body was held upright by him. He pointed it straight at the sky, as if he was going to fight with the heavens. Buzz! 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 A series of saber cries rang out as Chen Yiru's heavy saber began to glow with saber light. 5 meters. 10 meters. 20 meters. The saber ray continued to grow until it was more than 100 meters long. However, the attention of the people present on the scene was not on the saber ray. Is that a tear in the void? It seems like it. He can really tear the void. Heavens! Even an eminent celestial can only tear the space around the pseudo-realm that he created and leave a tear in the void that serves as an entrance to the pseudo-realm. It's not difficult for those at the 7th form of the Saint Celestial stage or above to open a tear in the void near a pseudo-realm created by an eminent celestial, as long as they can sense the existence of the pseudo-realm. However, the tear in the void doesn't seem like an entrance to a pseudo-realm created by an eminent celestial. Chapter 2346. Whoosh! 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 At this moment, the huge saber in Chen Yiru's hand that was pointing at the sky shot out a saber ray that was more than 100 meters long. The saber ray rubbed against the air and emitted a crisp sound. The frequency of the sound was no different from the sound of firecrackers. Rip! Rip! As the sound of firecrackers rang in the air, the sound of something being torn apart rang in the air as well. The sound came from the saber ray in Chen Yiru's hand. Black cracks that resembled tiny black snakes appeared in the air around the saber ray in his hand. They were ferocious and terrifying void rifts. These cracks appeared and disappeared as quickly as they appeared. However, every time they appeared, they would appear in groups, giving people a kind of visual shock, and even more so, making people feel a chill down their spines. After all, only when one's strength had reached a certain level would one be able to tear apart space and leave cracks in the air. Even an eminent celestial would not be able to do this. Perhaps, an eminent celestial would be able to create a tear in the void near the pseudo-realm, However, the tear in the void could only be the entrance to the pseudo-realm. At most, one could only tear a crack in the air near a pseudo-realm, since there was only one entrance to a pseudo-realm. Even if he's an eminent celestial, and there's a pseudo-realm nearby, it's impossible for him to leave so many cracks in the void. The people present on the scene felt their scalps go numb when they saw the cracks in the air around the saber ray in Chunyi-Ru's hand, because this was completely beyond the scope of their understanding. After all, even an eminent celestial would not be able to tear space apart so easily and leave so many cracks in the void. Could it be that he's not lying? Is he really a four-tribulation bodiless celestial who's stronger than an eminent celestial? Although I don't know what a four-tribulation bodiless celestial is, based on what I know, an eminent celestial can ascend to a higher realm and become a celestial. I'm afraid only a celestial is stronger than an eminent celestial, right? Immortal. You mean this old man is an immortal? Apart from immortals, who else can tear apart space so easily and casually, and leave cracks in the void? As Chunyi-Ru gathered his strength, the saber light in his hand tore through space, leaving behind cracks in the void. Everyone present was shocked again. At the same time, the doubt in their eyes when they looked at Chunyi-Ru disappeared, and was replaced with admiration. In their eyes, the brocade-robed old man in front of him was already an immortal, although they did not know why there was such a powerful existence in the mundane realm. However, this did not affect their respect for this old man, who could easily tear space apart. Duan Lingtian, take this. As Chunyi-Ru let out a beast-like roar, his body began to expand in front of everyone's eyes. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a giant that was over 100 meters tall. The thick and heavy saber in his hand also merged with the saber aura that was more than 100 meters long, turning into a giant saber that was more than 100 meters long. A giant and a saber. At this moment, Chunyi-Ru stood with his saber in hand. He looked like a god of sabers that had descended to the mortal realm. Peerless, Chunyi-Ru, who had transformed into a giant that was over 100 meters tall, suddenly cried out. His voice was like a thunder god's roar that reverberated in the ears of everyone present on the scene. At this moment, no. Some of the people with a weaker cultivation base felt their eardrums rupture. Some of them even bled from their 7 orifices and were on the verge of death. Chunyi-Ru's cry was extremely terrifying. This was only the beginning. Boom, 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 boom. Almost at the same time as Chunyi-Ru's shout, the 2 spiderweb-like cracks that had appeared on the ground beneath his feet spread even further, turning into a bottomless gully. When the onlookers rose into the air and dodged the ravines that formed from the cracks on the ground, the gigantic saber that Chunyi-Ru was holding with both hands, which was pointing at the sky, finally came crashing down. Buzz, 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 buzz. Wherever the huge saber passed, the sound of the saber was deafening. Cracks appeared in the void that quickly closed after a while. It was as though there were small black snakes flashing in and out of the void. During this process, the power that Chunyi-Ru had been restraining in his saber was completely unleashed as the saber whistled through the air. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. As soon as Chunyi-Ru's huge saber whistled out, a terrifying energy surged out in all directions like a raging sea. Instantly bang, 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 bang. Those who had just risen into the air and were close to Chunyi-Ru were affected by the energy that swept out from Chunyi-Ru's huge saber. Their bodies exploded and turned into a bloody mist. They did not even have time to react. In the blink of an eye, the surrounding void and the surrounding ground were all shrouded in a bloody mist, turning the place crimson red. Boom! Rumble! When the bloody mist appeared, the restaurant in front of them was shrouded in the power of Chunyi-Ru's huge saber. In an instant it collapsed and turned into ruins. Those who crawled out were all covered in blood. It was unknown if they were still alive. It was not only the restaurant that was affected. Even the surrounding buildings collapsed and turned into ruins when they were affected by Chunyi-Ru's power. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. It happened only when Chunyi-Ru drew his saber, that the onlookers did not even have time to react. Buzz! At the same time, the earth-shattering sound of the saber rang out. It was the huge saber in Chun Yiru's hand. It covered the sky and covered the sun. It was powerful enough to split Mount Hua. It whistled and whistled as if it could destroy everything in its path. At this moment, Chun Yiru seemed to have transformed into a peerless god of war. He had unleashed a peerless attack. And this saber strike of his was named Peerless. Peerless saber. How dare you call it peerless with such little power? Is it worthy? However, Duanling Tian merely smiled disdainfully as he faced Chun Yiru's peerless saber ray. He easily protected the three women by his side as he faced the saber ray that seemed capable of destroying everything in its path. It was as if he did not care about Chun Yiru's saber at all. Go! Seeing Chun Yiru's peerless saber, which had the power to tear the void apart, Duan Lingtian calmly uttered a word. Almost at the same time Duan Lingtian uttered this word. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The hundreds and thousands of white sword rays that were hovering around Duan Lingtian shot out again, in just a blink of an eye. The sword gleams continued to expand and condense in front of him, forming a huge sword net that was like a layer of protective shield. During this process, the sword rays that formed the net of swords left cracks in the void that looked like tiny black snakes as they shot through the void. These void rifts opened one after another, and then closed again not long after. However, because the hundreds and thousands of white sword lights were too dazzling, even Chun Yiru himself didn't notice the spatial cracks that appeared and disappeared frequently. Otherwise, he would have noticed it. When the hundreds and thousands of sword rays shot out from Duan Lingtian's sword, they were as powerful as Chun Yiru's peerless saber. Buzz! 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 The sound of saber whistling reverberated in the air. Chun Yiru, who had transformed into a giant over 100 meters tall, wielded the huge saber that was more than 100 meters long and landed on the net of swords that had formed in front of Duan Lingtian. Break! Chun Yiru roared again when the huge saber was about to land on the net of swords. His voice was like a clap of thunder that temporarily suppressed the sound of saber whistling. In the end, Chun Yiru's huge saber, that was more than 100 meters long, finally landed on the net of swords. Boom! When the saber landed on the net of swords, it was as though the saber had landed on the surface of the sea. It caused the surface of the sea to tremble and sink. After a few moments, boom, 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 boom. When the huge blade that was over 100 meters long pressed down on the sword net until it trembled to the extreme, the two of them exploded at the same time. Two vast and majestic forces collided, causing the void to tremble. The air was constantly compressed and rubbed against each other, and numerous ferocious cracks appeared in the void. At the same time, the enormous mushroom cloud formed by the collision of the two forces also emitted waves of extremely terrifying shock waves that swept in all directions. It carried a strength that seemed to be able to engulf the entire world as it continued to spread. Boom, 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 boom. A series of explosions rang in the air. These loud noises came from an area of 1,000 meters with the mushroom cloud as the center. The shockwaves from the mushroom cloud flattened the land within 1,000 meters of the mushroom cloud. Apart from a few powerhouses at the Saint Celestial stage, who managed to escape, the rest of the onlookers were killed. Even Chun Yiru's two servants, one at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage, and the other at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage, had retreated 1,000 meters away from the mushroom cloud. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sound of the wind could be heard clearly. Based on this, one could see how quiet the scene was. At this moment, Duan Lingtian and Chun Yiru were hovering in the air. Chapter 2347. Everything within a 1,000-meter radius was flattened. Even the ground had a crater that was a few hundred meters deep. During this process, not only were the buildings within a radius of 1,000 meters flattened, and huge craters were blasted into the ground, even the people present were killed by the aftershock of the explosion. How terrifying! Is that even a human strength? Although I've never seen an eminent celestial before, I've read about them in some ancient books. There were descriptions of battles between eminent celestials, But it wasn't as terrifying as this. Don't tell me you think they're eminent celestials? Didn't you see that the old man, who called himself a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, was able to tear the void apart? Even Duan Lingtian is able to tear the void apart, right? I saw it as well. Earlier, when the sword rays shot out from Duan Lingtian's body and formed the sword net, there were indeed many cracks in the void. It's obvious that their first exchange ended in a draw. It seems like Duan Lingtian isn't just an eminent celestial. The few people who had managed to escape from the 1,000-meter radius of Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru were shocked when they looked at Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru again. When their eyes landed on Duan Lingtian, it was as though they had seen a ghost. Initially, they were skeptical about whether Duan Lingtian was an eminent celestial or not. However, they no longer doubted Duan Lingtian's strength. Based on Duan Lingtian's strength, it was impossible for him to be just an eminent celestial. This was because Duan Lingtian's strength had far surpassed that of an eminent celestial. In fact, he was comparable to a celestial from a higher realm. So this is the current successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect? The current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect? When they thought of this, their hearts trembled again. How is this possible? He actually managed to block Milord's peerless blade, and was even able to fight Milord on equal footing? How is this possible? Presently, it wasn't just the few surviving existences at the Saint Celestial stage and above who were shocked by the scene before their eyes. Even Chen Yiru's two servants were horrified. When they looked at Duan Lingtian again, it was as if they had seen a ghost. Wasn't Duan Lingtian an eminent celestial? How could a mere eminent celestial withstand the all-out attack of their lord, a four-tribulation bodiless celestial? After all, although the peerless saber was not their lord's strongest technique, it was enough to kill a three-tribulation bodiless celestial, let alone an eminent celestial. Is it possible that he's a four-tribulation bodiless celestial as well? When Chen Yiru's two servants recalled how Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru were evenly matched earlier, they could not help but think to themselves, Duan Lingtian was not an eminent celestial, he was a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. What happened? There was such a huge commotion earlier. Heavens! Look over there. The land within a radius of 1,000 meters has actually turned into ruins. Moreover, there's a huge crater in the ground. The crater must be at least a few hundred meters deep, right? Even if two eminent celestials in the mundane realms fought, they wouldn't be able to create such a huge commotion, right? After all, the ground and the materials used to construct the buildings in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land are extremely high-grade. The materials from the Debussy subterranean can't compare to them. That's right. Even then, not only was the land within 1,000 meters flattened, but there's even a crater that's a few hundred meters deep. The commotion in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land attracted many people, since it was considered a bustling city. These people came from all over the city, and their numbers were increasing. There are a few people over there. Soon after, someone saw a few people hovering in the air outside the crater. These people were none other than the few Saint Celestial stage powerhouses who were lucky enough to survive, and Chen Yiru's two servants. There are a few people over there as well. At the same time, someone noticed a few figures hovering above the crater that was hundreds of meters deep. These figures were none other than Duan Lingtian Ke, Duan Siling, Gan Ruyen and Chen Yiru. At this moment, Duan Lingtian was hovering in the air, protecting Ke and the other two women. His expression was calm and indifferent. Chen Yiru's eyes were filled with shock as he looked at Duan Lingtian. It took him a long time before he regained his senses. Who can tell me what's going on here? Let's go. Let's go and ask. A group of people who had heard the commotion quickly arrived near the few Saint Celestial stage powerhouses who were lucky enough to survive. They began to ask them what had happened. If it was any other time, these people who were at the Saint Celestial stage and above would naturally be arrogant and would not bother to answer these people's questions. However, after witnessing Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru's strength, they realized how insignificant they were. They were like ants in front of Duan Lingtian and Chenyi Ruyen. They could not even withstand a single blow. If they had not been lucky earlier, they would have been killed by Duan Lingtian and Chenyi Ruyen. After all, the shockwaves from Duan Lingtian and Chenyi Ru's battle could easily wipe them out. That purple-clad young man is Duan Lingtian, the former guardian of the Zoroastrianism. Currently he has another identity. He's the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect. He's the current sect leader of the Seven Absolutes sect. His strength surpasses eminent celestials. Earlier, the few Saint Celestials who were at the Saint Celestial stage and above no longer acted arrogantly, as they patiently recounted everything that had happened. The people who had come to watch the show were shocked. Duan Lingtian, the former guardian of the Zoroastrianism, is actually the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolutes sect, the sect leader of the Seven Absolutes sect. Duan Lingtian's strength surpasses eminent celestials in just a few years. Moreover, he can even tear space apart and leave cracks in the void when he attacks. Indeed, tearing space apart isn't something an eminent celestial can do. Aren't eminent celestials the peak of the mundane realms? Once an eminent celestial becomes an eminent celestial, he'll be guided by the celestial ascension force to ascend to a higher realm and become a true celestial. However, it's extremely difficult for a celestial to return to the mundane realms. However, the strength they displayed is clearly above the strength of an eminent celestial. How do you explain this? I'm certain their strength is comparable to a celestial. I just don't know how they managed to raise their strength to such a level. That finely dressed old man, Chenyi Ru, seems to call himself a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. The people who had just arrived began to discuss among themselves when they regained their senses. All of them were shocked by Duan Lingtian and Chenyi Ru's strength. Chenyi Ru? Did all of you say the old man's name is Chenyi Ru? Also, you said that Chenyi Ru used a saber and shouted peerless when he used his technique? A middle-aged man who was dressed like a scholar suddenly asked with a horrified expression on his face as he looked at the few Saint Celestial stage powerhouses who were lucky enough to survive. Yes, although they did not know why the middle-aged scholar asked this question, they still nodded. From the beginning until the end, they did not see how Chenyi Ru had made his move. However, they were 100% certain that Chenyi Ru was using a saber and had shouted the words matchless. Heavens! He can't be that person, right? The middle-aged scholar seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly opened his eyes wide. His face was full of shock and disbelief. He was dumbstruck. What are you talking about? Don't tell me you recognize him? Who's he? Hey, if you recognize him, hurry up and tell us who he is. Is it fun to keep people in suspense? Soon after, the people around the middle-aged scholar could not help but urge him to speak. At this moment, the middle-aged scholar finally regained his senses. He gulped before he continued to say, I've been keeping an eye on the Supreme Saint ranking for a long time. In fact, I've often read the previous Supreme Saint ranking. Get to the point. Before the middle-aged scholar could finish speaking, many people frowned and interrupted him. I'm about to get to the point. The middle-aged scholar frowned when he was interrupted. He continued to say, I remember the person who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago was none other than Chenyi Ru. Moreover, Chenyi Ru was also known as Chun Sandao at that time. Chun Sandao was a famous saber cultivator prodigy in that era. He fused martial tactics and divine abilities to create three extremely powerful saber techniques. They were the Peerless Saber, the World-Cleansing Saber, and the World-Annihilating Saber. The middle-aged scholar paused for a moment when he reached this part of his sentence. He studied the finely dressed old man in the distance, as though he was trying to confirm if the old man was the person from 5,000 years ago. You mean Chenyi Ru is Chun Sandao, who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago? Chapter 2348. It must be a coincidence. The middle-aged scholar shook his head in response to the question. Coincidence? How can there be such a coincidence? The finely dressed old man is also called Chenyi Ru, and he uses a saber as well. Moreover, He shouted peerless when he attacked earlier. It's very likely that he used the peerless saber technique. That's right. How can there be such a coincidence in this world? In my opinion, Chun Ru is the powerhouse who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago. The middle-aged scholar shook his head and said it was a coincidence. However, the people around him rejected his words. It was fine if the name was a coincidence. It was fine if the weapon was a coincidence. How could the name of the saber technique be a coincidence? How could there be so many coincidences? Moreover, all of them happened to the same person. To be honest, I don't think there's such a coincidence. The middle-aged scholar could not help but smile wryly. However, according to the records of the Supreme Saint ranking, Chun Ru, who was ranked second 5,000 years ago, failed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation 4,000 years ago, when the Celestial Ascension Tribulation descended. He failed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation? Along with the middle-aged scholar's words, the surrounding group of people were instantly dumbfounded. They were all dumbstruck. In their opinion, this was not the case. Failure to pass the Celestial Ascension Tribulation meant death. If Chun Ru had failed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation 4,000 years ago, it was impossible for him to be the finely dressed old man today. Are you sure Chun Ru from 5,000 years ago failed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation? Many people looked at the middle-aged scholar skeptically. Take a look for yourselves. The middle-aged scholar raised his hand and took out an ancient book. It was an issue of the Supreme Saint ranking from more than 4,000 years ago. The book contained records of Chun Ru's failure to pass the Celestial Ascension Tribulation. The people around him fell silent when they saw the records. Could it be that Chun Ru is a descendant of Chun Ru? Could it be that he's named Chun Ru to commemorate his ancestor? Soon, someone made such a guess. That's possible. If that's the case, it makes sense for this person to be able to use the peerless saber. Many people nodded in agreement. At this moment, Chun Ru's two servants couldn't take it anymore. They snorted coldly in unison, and the surrounding air seemed to freeze at this moment. Our master is Chun Sandow, Chun Ru, who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago. Don't make wild guesses if you are ignorant. As he finished speaking, the burly middle-aged man's tone was mixed with a bit of anger, who said that failure to transcend the tribulation would definitely result in death. A bunch of frogs at the bottom of a well. The middle-aged man with a bamboo pole glanced at the surrounding people with disdain and mocked. Earlier, the group of people who had rushed over to join in the fun had learned about the identity of the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man from the few Saint Celestials who were lucky enough to survive. They knew they were the servants of the embroidered-robed old man, whose strength far surpassed eminent Celestials. The burly middle-aged man was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage. For this reason, the crowd was wary of the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man. However, when they heard the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man's words, they were dumbfounded. He's really Chun Sandow Chun Ru, who was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago. Failure to transcend the tribulation doesn't necessarily mean death? Regardless of whether it was the words of the burly middle-aged man or the bamboo middle-aged man, at this moment, they were so shocked that the hearts of the group of people who came to join in the fun fiercely twitched. However, what shocked them the most was the skinny middle-aged man's words, who said that failure to transcend the tribulation would definitely result in death. A bunch of frogs at the bottom of a well. While the words of the bamboo middle-aged man ridiculed them for being frogs at the bottom of a well, it seemed as though he had opened the door to a new world for them. Failure to transcend the tribulation doesn't necessarily mean death? The people in the surroundings, regardless of whether they were Saint Celestial stage powerhouses, who were lucky enough to survive earlier, or those who had rushed over to join in the fun, shifted their gazes to the middle-aged man with a bamboo pole. Sir, you said failure to transcend the tribulation doesn't necessarily mean death? The middle-aged scholar who had mentioned Chun Ru was ranked second on the Supreme Saint ranking 5,000 years ago, asked respectfully as he looked at the bamboo-skinned middle-aged man. Although the few Saint Celestials who were lucky enough to survive did not mention the skinny middle-aged man's cultivation base, he knew the skinny middle-aged man's cultivation base. However, in his opinion, if one of the finely dressed old man's servants was at the 8th form of the Saint Celestial stage, there was no doubt the other servant was not weak as well. For this reason, he did not dare to be rude when he asked the skinny middle-aged man's question. When the middle-aged scholar asked the skinny middle-aged man's question, the crowd began to look at the skinny middle-aged man with a burning gaze. Of course, the skinny middle-aged man seemed to enjoy everyone's attention as he said matter-of-factly, "When a powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage discovers he can't transcend the Celestial Ascension tribulation, there's still a chance for him to successfully detach his soul from his body and escape." And after his soul left his body and escaped, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the skinny middle-aged man began to talk about bodiless celestials. He also mentioned that bodiless celestials could not reincarnate, that bodiless celestials had to face the bodiless celestial tribulation every 1,000 years, and that bodiless celestials were divided into 9 stages. Only after successfully transcending 10 bodiless celestial tribulations would one be able to ascend a second time. The introduction by the middle-aged man overturned the understanding of the surrounding group of people, causing them to be stunned and unable to recover for a long time. Bodiless celestials? They had to face 10 bodiless celestial tribulations in 10,000 years? They could die at any time during this process? Only after successfully transcending 10 bodiless celestial tribulations would one be able to ascend a second time and ascend to a Devata realm. A 1 tribulation bodiless celestial, whose strength was comparable to an ordinary powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage. A 2 tribulation bodiless celestial, whose strength was comparable to an eminent celestial. A 3 tribulation bodiless celestial. At this moment, the people who had survived the battle between Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru felt as though their world had been turned upside down. A door to a new world was opening in front of them. As it turns out, bodiless celestials still exist in this world. Bodiless celestials are so strong that they're comparable to real celestials. 3 tribulation bodiless celestials are stronger than eminent celestials. To think that I thought eminent celestials were the strongest in the mundane realms. A frog at the bottom of a well. I was indeed a frog at the bottom of a well. Many people could not help but sigh when they finally regained their senses. So that's how it is. That's how it is. Calculating the time, it's been exactly 4,000 years since Chen Sandow, Chen Yiru, failed his heavenly tribulation. Since Lord Chen Yiru is still alive, it's only natural that he has overcome 4 bodiless celestial tribulations and become a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. The middle-aged scholar nodded his head in realization. A 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. At the same time, the few people who had survived the battle between Duan Lingtian and Chen Yiru finally understood what a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial was. It was as Chen Yiru had said. A 4 tribulation bodiless celestial was much stronger than an eminent celestial. Duan Lingtian, the former guardian of the fire worship sect, the successor of the fog rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 absolute sect, and the sect leader of the 7 absolute sect, managed to come to a draw with Lord Chen Yiru. Doesn't this mean his strength is comparable to a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial? Someone exclaimed in shock. Impossible. Lord Chen Yiru, didn't you say Duan Lingtian is only an eminent celestial? At his level, it's impossible for him to misjudge Duan Lingtian's cultivation base. Someone questioned. Humph. At the same time, one of Chen Yiru's 2 servants, the burly middle-aged man, scoffed before he said, "Only a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial would be able to tear a hole in the void. Only 4 tribulation bodiless celestials and above are able to tear space apart and leave cracks in the void." Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Apart from that, no matter how powerful an ordinary 3 tribulation disbanded celestial is, it's impossible for him to tear open space and leave a crack in the void. Naturally, this applies to ordinary 3 tribulation bodiless celestials. 3 tribulation bodiless celestials who have obtained divine abilities or celestial supreme treasures from the Devata realms would be able to tear a hole in the void as well. The burly middle-aged man continued to say, with the help of divine abilities and celestial supreme treasures, his strength is comparable to a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, or even stronger than a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. The burly middle-aged man paused for a moment before he looked at Duan Lingtian and said confidently, Duan Lingtian's cultivation base is comparable to a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. Regardless of Duan Lingtian's cultivation base, the strength he displayed earlier is comparable to a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. As soon as the burly middle-aged man finished speaking, everyone turned to look at the purple figure hovering above the huge pit. Duan Lingtian's strength is comparable to a four-tribulation bodiless celestial? Duan Lingtian. Meanwhile, Chunyi Ru, a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, who had been deep in thought for a long time, finally regained his senses. When he looked at Duan Lingtian again, a hint of greed could be seen in his eyes. Chapter 2349. If I'm not mistaken, the assist-type divine ability you cast must be from the Devata realm. Chunyi Ru, a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, said as he stared at Duan Lingtian. The greed in his eyes burned brighter and brighter. Although he sounded like he was asking a question, his tone was filled with certainty. He was certain this was because he had extended his divine consciousness earlier to investigate the surroundings. He discovered that the surrounding area was extremely dense. In the surrounding area, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth within a radius of 10,000 miles had become extremely thin. It was similar to where he was currently. Based on this, he was certain the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surrounding area was extremely dense. The heaven and earth spirit energy in the surrounding 10,000 miles had been completely devoured by Duan Lingtian earlier. Due to this reason, it had yet to fully recover. Naturally, Chunyi Ru could roughly guess how much the world energy within a radius of 10,000 miles would increase a person's strength by when they were gathered together and bestowed upon him. It was not impossible for the heaven and earth spirit energy to raise the strength of an eminent celestial to the level of a four-tribulation bodiless celestial in just a short time. Chunyi Ru was shocked by how Duan Lingtian was able to devour the heaven and earth spirit energy in such a large area. He could tell the assist-type divine ability Duan Lingtian had mastered was not an ordinary divine ability. At the very least, it was not from the mundane realm. Devouring the heaven and earth spirit energy in the surrounding area, such an assist-type divine ability would not be an ordinary divine ability even in the Devata realms, let alone the mundane realms. It was most likely a high-grade divine ability. Greed rose in Chunyi Ru's heart when he thought about this. He could not wait to take the assist-type divine ability for himself. Oh, you can even tell. Duan Lingtian glanced at Chunyi Ru indifferently when he heard Chunyi Ru's words. Humph. I'm a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. With my powerful divine consciousness, it's easy for me to probe your cultivation base. I'm certain you're only an eminent celestial, not a bodiless celestial. Chunyi Ru scoffed. An eminent celestial's strength is comparable to a four-tribulation bodiless celestial after casting an assist-type divine ability. No one would believe you if you say the assist-type divine ability you've mastered isn't from the Devata realms. Chunyi Ru said confidently. He was certain he had guessed Duan Lingtian. A divine ability from the Devata realm? Chunyi Ru did not deliberately suppress his voice, so it clearly reached the ears of the group of people within 1,000 meters. For a moment, their pupils shrank, and a look of shock and disbelief appeared on their faces. Even Chunyi Ru's two servants were dumbfounded by what they saw. Although their master had discovered Duan Lingtian was an eminent celestial, they were certain their master had made a mistake, or that Duan Lingtian had used some technique to conceal his cultivation base. They did not expect Duan Lingtian to be so confident. They did not expect Duan Lingtian to be an eminent celestial. Moreover, according to their master, Duan Lingtian's assist-type divine ability was from the Devata realms. Although the burly middle-aged man had mentioned the divine ability from the Devata realms to the people around him, he did not expect Duan Lingtian to be so confident. Even in his wildest dreams, he did not expect Duan Lingtian to be so confident. It was obvious Duan Ling Tian had not mastered an ordinary divine ability in the Devata realms. What a joke! An eminent celestial, who cast an assist-type divine ability, had the strength of a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. Such an assist-type divine ability would be extraordinary even in the Devata realms. The assist-type divine ability Duan Ling Tian has mastered must be extraordinary even in the Devata realms. Both the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man were shocked. Based on Master Chen Yiru's words, Duan Ling Tian has mastered an assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms? I thought Duan Ling Tian is a bodiless celestial as well. However, it seems like I was wrong. Duan Ling Tian is only an eminent celestial. The reason he's so strong is because he has mastered an assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms. An assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms? It's said that the movement divine ability Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, has mastered is also an assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms. Is it possible that Zoroastrianism has a way to obtain a divine ability from the Devata realms? After all, Duan Ling Tian was once a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Now that you mention it, it's possible. Meanwhile, a group of people who were standing 1,000 meters away from the Devata realms began to discuss among themselves. They suspected that the assist-type divine ability Duan Ling Tian had mastered from the Devata realms was most likely from Zoroastrianism. After all, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism had also mastered a movement divine ability from the Devata realms. Moreover, the movement divine ability that the sect leader of Zoroastrianism had mastered was widely acknowledged as the number one movement divine ability in the Tao Martial Saint Land. You're smart. Under the watchful eyes of the others, Duan Ling Tian smiled faintly. Based on his words, he confirmed Chen Yiru's guess. As soon as Duan Ling Tian finished speaking, the crowd gasped in shock. Gasp! 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 Gasps rang in the air from 1,000 meters away. It came from the group of people who were watching the show from afar. After they received confirmation from Duan Ling Tian, they could not help but gasp. Duan Ling Tian had really mastered an assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms. For a time, many people's eyes lit up as they stared at Duan Ling Tian with greed. At this moment, it was as though they had become the hunters while Duan Ling Tian had become the prey. They had completely forgotten that Duan Ling Tian was not an easy target. After all, they did not have the ability to kill Duan Ling Tian. Greed was enough to make people lose their minds. This sentence was not false at all. As expected, after Chen Yiru received confirmation from Duan Ling Tian, his eyes lit up like two bright stars in the night sky. In the next moment, Duan Ling Tian. Chen Yiru looked at Duan Ling Tian condescendingly as he said in a clear voice, I have to admit that your combat strength is not inferior to mine after you cast your assist-type divine ability. However, I didn't use my full strength earlier. What I cast earlier was the weakest of my three saber techniques, the Peerless Saber. After the Peerless Saber, there's the World Cleansing Saber and the World Annihilating Saber. If I cast the World Cleansing Saber, even if you don't die, you'll be severely injured. If I cast the World Annihilating Saber, you'll definitely die. Chen Yiru's words were filled with confidence. As he spoke, he seemed to have confirmed one thing for himself. He thought Duan Ling Tian had unleashed his full strength without holding back earlier. That was why he was evenly matched with the Peerless Saber that he had cast. So, Duan Ling Tian asked indifferently when he heard Chen Yiru's words. If you're willing to swear on the lightning penalty oath that you'll share your assist-type divine ability with me after you've mastered it, I, Chen Yiru, a four-tribulation bodiless celestial, will swear on the lightning penalty oath that I'll spare your life. At this point, Chen Yiru didn't beat around the bush and directly stated his intention of saying those words. His purpose for doing this was also very simple. He wanted to obtain Duan Ling Tian's assist-type divine ability from the Devata realms. If I can master that assist-type divine ability, I don't have to master it to its peak. As long as I can master it to the same level as Duan Ling Tian, I won't be afraid even if I have to face a five-tribulation bodiless celestial. Thinking of this, Chen Yiru couldn't help but feel excited. In his opinion, Duan Lingtian was in a dilemma. Under his threat, Duan Lingtian would definitely obey his request and swear on the lightning penalty oath obediently in order to survive. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. At the same time, the group of people who were 1,000 meters away also had their eyes trained on Duan Lingtian. They were curious. Would Duan Lingtian obediently obey Chen Yiru's request? Naturally, they thought Duan Lingtian had done his best. Earlier, Duan Lingtian had unleashed his full strength while Chen Yiru had held back. Therefore, it should not be difficult for Chen Yiru to kill Duan Lingtian. However, as soon as Chen Yiru finished speaking, everyone turned to look at Duan Lingtian curiously. Ha ha ha. Duan Lingtian suddenly burst out laughing as though he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Chen Yiru's expression darkened. He was about to lose his temper when he heard Duan Lingtian's words. Duan Lingtian said mockingly with a disdainful expression on his face, "What world cleansing saber? What world annihilation saber? It's nothing more than a petty trick like your peerless saber. Do you think I've unleashed my full strength earlier?" Duan Lingtian said mockingly as he looked at Chen Yiru. What do you mean? Chen Yiru's expression changed when he heard Duan Lingtian's words, and sensed Duan Lingtian's confidence. An ominous feeling rose in his heart. What do I mean? Duan Lingtian smiled disdainfully. He raised his hand and a beam of white light shot out of his palm, before it transformed into a 3-foot-long sword that emitted a sharp aura. In the next moment, sword-wielding technique. Duan Lingtian's eyes turned cold as the 3-foot-long sword in his hand shot out like a meteor toward Chen Yiru. Swoosh. The sound of the sword whistling was short-lived. Rip, rip, rip. Chapter 2350. Previously, Duan Lingtian had only casually defended himself against Chen Yiru's peerless saber. He did not even use any martial techniques or divine abilities. For this reason, Duan Lingtian did not feel angry when he heard Chen Yiru's threat. Instead, he laughed as though he had just heard a joke. To him, Chen Yiru's threat was indeed the biggest joke in the world. Did Chen Yiru think Duan Lingtian had used his full strength earlier? Little did Chen Yiru know that Duan Lingtian's strength was at least 10 times, or even 100 times stronger than Chen Yiru's sword-wielding art. At this moment, Duan Lingtian no longer intended to toy with Chen Yiru. He immediately used the sword-wielding art, the third stage of the Supreme Sword Dao mental cultivation method, the Sovereign Heart Sword. Swoosh. The 3-foot-long sword that was formed from celestial origin energy, mixed with saint origin energy, tore through the air like a shooting star in the night sky, dazzling everyone's eyes in an instant. Swish, swish, swish. It was like a shooting star that tore through the sky. Everywhere it passed, space shook and collapsed, and it left behind numerous narrow, long, and savage spatial rifts that were like numerous thick black pythons. Although these void cracks were constantly healing after they were open, they were too long and narrow. Therefore, it would take at least 15 minutes for them to completely heal. The cracks in the void were not something the cracks in the void could compare to. The former were like thick black pythons, while the latter were like small black snakes. The former would take about 15 minutes to heal, while the latter would only take a blink of an eye to heal. Impossible! Chen Yiru cried out in shock and disbelief when he saw Duan Lingtian unleashing the sword-wielding art, and easily tearing open the terrifying spatial rifts in the air. His expression changed drastically, and a hint of disbelief could be seen on his face. At this moment, his tone was mixed with endless terror. It was as if the end of the world had arrived, and he was about to die. Chen Yiru's reaction was, naturally, due to the long and narrow crack in the void that Duan Lingtian's sword had left behind. He could tell Duan Lingtian's attack was far stronger than what he could withstand. His attack is comparable to a 5 tribulation bodiless celestial's attack. The moment this thought appeared in his mind, Chen Yiru also noticed that he had been locked onto by the sword chi. He knew that he couldn't avoid it, and in his shock and anger, he strangely calmed down. Saber of Purification. After calming down, Chen Yiru immediately unleashed the energy that he had been accumulating for a long time. The moment Chen Yiru's body was completely enveloped by the cold aura, His entire body blossomed with dazzling light like the sun. With Chun Yiru's body as the center, an extremely sharp energy swept out in all directions. It was as if the saber god was enraged and had descended to punish the world, wanting to exterminate all living beings in this world. If someone was above Chun Yiru and looked down, they would be able to see. A 360-degree shockwave with Chun Yiru at the center seemed to have transformed into a saber of purification. It shot out countless saber rays in all directions, as though it was going to purify everything. Wherever the shockwave from the saber light passed, the void would crumble. Cracks would appear in the void and spread in all directions. Oh no! As soon as Chun Yiru unleashed the blade of purification, the expressions of his two servants changed drastically. They immediately soared into the air and shot toward the horizon as fast as they could. It was as though something terrifying would happen if they continued to stay where they were. Saber of Annihilation. After casting the Saber of Purification, Chun Yiru did not hesitate to cast the most powerful saber attack he could muster. The name Saber of Annihilation alone gave people the feeling that it could destroy the heavens and earth. Buzz! 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 Along with the buzzing sound of the saber, Chun Yiru's energy skyrocketed. Finally, it transformed into thousands of saber rays that merged into one and transformed into a gigantic saber. From afar, it looked as though it could pierce through the heavens and earth. It could hold up the heavens and stand on the earth. Rip! 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 At the same time, countless cracks appeared in the void around the gigantic saber. Although they were slightly narrower than before, they were not as wide as the cracks Duanling Tian left behind when he wielded his sword in the air. Saber of Annihilation. As soon as the shockwave from the world-cleansing saber collided with Duanling Tian's 3-foot-long sword, the gigantic saber that had appeared above Chun Yiru's head began to descend. Buzz! The gigantic saber seemed to be able to tear apart half of the sky as it slashed down. It seemed as though it contained boundless energy as it targeted Duanling Tian. Buzz! 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 Wherever the gigantic saber passed, it seemed as though thousands of saber rays had struck at the same time. The ear-piercing sound of the saber rang continuously. Rip! 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 As the gigantic saber slashed down, the originally calm void began to crack inch by inch, leaving behind countless tiny cracks in the void. In just a blink of an eye, the cracks had closed up again. The Saber of Annihilation had opened up the heavens and earth. Black Turtle's Barrier. In the face of Chun Yiru's Saber of Purification, Duanling Tian's energy surged out of his body and formed the silhouette of a gigantic black turtle around him and the three women to protect them. He did not need to use any martial tactics or divine abilities to block Chun Yiru's peerless saber. Now that he had cast his defensive divine ability, the Black Turtle's Barrier, it was not difficult for him to block Chun Yiru's Saber of Purification. The Saber of Purification's energy was not much stronger than the peerless saber because it was too scattered. As for the Saber of Annihilation that opened up the heavens and earth, this is the Saber of Annihilation? That's all there is to it. Duanling Tian sneered as he thought to himself. Instantly, the 3-foot-long blade that he controlled with the Imperial Sword technique suddenly changed directions and met the enormous blade light that descended from the sky and seemed to be able to split the heavens and the earth apart. Whoosh! Wherever the 3-foot-long sword passed, long and narrow spatial cracks would appear. It was as if the space was a fragile piece of paper that could be easily sliced and torn apart. Waves of ice-cold and sharp aura continuously swept out from the 3-feet-long green sword. Nothing could be more terrifying than this. When Duanling Tian used the sword-wielding art to block Chun Yiru's World Destroyer Saber, Chun Yiru's World-Cleansing Saber collided with the black tortoise's silhouette that enveloped Duanling Tian, Kerr, and the others. Immediately, boom, 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 boom. Accompanied by a series of earth-shattering explosions, the black tortoise's silhouette trembled violently. In the end, the world-cleansing saber did not manage to break through the black tortoise's silhouette's defense. It did not manage to break through Duanling Tian's defensive divine ability, the black tortoise's barrier, until the moment it was destroyed. Naturally, the The world-cleansing saber was only destroyed when it swept toward Duan Lingtian. In another direction, the world-cleansing saber continued to expand. In just a blink of an eye, it annihilated the group of people who were watching the show from 1,000 meters away. These people did not even have the chance to react before they were killed. That was not all. After the world-cleansing saber annihilated these people, it continued to sweep in all directions in the city, as though it was going to annihilate all the living beings in the city. Swoosh! At the same time, the 3-foot-long blade that Duan Lingtian controlled with the sword-wielding art, that seemed to be aided by the gods, collided with the world annihilation saber, that seemed as though it could split heaven and earth apart. Swoosh! 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 After a brief stalemate, the world-cleansing saber destroyed the world-cleansing saber. The gigantic world-cleansing saber could not withstand a single blow from Duan Lingtian's 3-foot-long sword. It was annihilated in just a blink of an eye. They're not even on the same level. Although Chen Yiru had prepared himself mentally, he could not help but feel despair when he saw the outcome of the world-cleansing saber, after he cast his 2 most powerful saber techniques. At the same time, he roared in his heart. How did Duan Lingtian obtain such a heaven-defying assist-type divine ability? Chen Yiru finally realized. Duan Lingtian's assist-type divine ability was even more terrifying than he had imagined. At this moment he realized something. Previously, Duan Lingtian had only casually gathered his energy to block the world-cleansing saber. He did not use any martial tactics or divine abilities at all. If Duan Lingtian had used any martial tactics or divine abilities, his strength would be comparable to a 5 tribulation bodiless celestial. The numerous spatial rifts that would take approximately 15 minutes to completely heal were once again reflected in Chen Yiru's eyes, causing him to be completely disheartened. Chen Yiru did not expect Duan Lingtian to be so powerful. Although Duan Lingtian had displayed his true strength, it was not his true strength. He had not even used the 4th stage of the Sovereign Heart Sword, the Sword Heart Illumination, to become one with the sword. Swoosh! Chen Yiru closed his eyes in despair when he saw the world-cleansing saber that had crushed his world-cleansing saber. It was as though he was waiting for death to decide his fate. My lord! All of a sudden, buzz! Along with a soft sound, the 3-foot-long blade that was suspended in the air swung down at an unhurried speed. At this time, not to mention Chen Yiru, even Chen Yiru's 2 servants could easily see the trajectory of the 3-foot-long sword. Swoosh! Swoosh! Accompanied by the sound of something being torn apart, the 3-foot-long sword seemed to be casually swinging through the air, leaving behind a long and narrow crack in the void. As soon as the spatial crack appeared, Chen Yiru and his 2 servants narrowed their eyes in unison. This was because the tear in the void was much narrower and longer than the tear in the void that Duan Lingtian had created when he wielded his sword. In fact, it was twice as long as the tear in the void. It'll take at least 30 minutes for the tear in the void to completely heal, right? The thought popped up in Chen Yiru's mind. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, his expression changed drastically. It seems like only a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial, or above, would be able to create such a tear in the void, right? This is his strongest attack. It's comparable to a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial's attack? Chen Yiru felt his scalp go numb when he thought about this. Heavens! Duan Lingtian's cultivation base was only an eminent celestial, but when he cast his assist-type divine ability and his sword technique, his attack was comparable to a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial. Is his sword technique from the Devata realm as well? For a moment, Chen Yiru couldn't help but think. That's not right. He's the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 absolutes sect. The previous successor of the Fog Rain progeny was Feng Qingyang, the prodigy sword saint. Is it possible that he's Feng Qingyang's successor? If that's the case, it makes sense. After all, Feng Qingyang was a monstrous genius back then. It's said that when he was an eminent celestial, he had killed an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial when he was close to ascending. If Duan Lingtian is Feng Qingyang's successor, it wouldn't be strange for him to possess strength comparable to a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial when he was only an eminent celestial. After all, Feng Qingyang was a monstrous sword cultivator who had killed an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial when he was only an eminent celestial. Many thoughts flashed through Qinyi Ru's mind at this moment. A hint of reverence could be seen in his eyes when he thought about the prodigy sword saint, Feng Qingyang. Qinyi Ru, I'll use my strongest attack to end your life today. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's voice rang in Qinyi Ru's ears again, causing chills to run up his spine. The voice came from the sword hovering in the air in the distance. At this moment, Duan Lingtian had transformed into a sword. He was the sword, and the sword was him. Wait! As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, the 3-foot-long blade trembled violently. Just as it was about to strike, Qinyi Ru hastily stopped Duan Lingtian. The 3-foot-long sword paused for a moment. Duan Lingtian, are you the successor of Senior Feng Qingyang, the prodigy sword saint, the former successor of the Fog Rain progeny of the 7 Absolute sect? Qinyi Ru asked after taking a deep breath. So what if I am? Duan Lingtian's indifferent voice rang from the 3-foot-long sword. The sword technique you're using, is it Senior Feng Qingyang's ultimate technique? Qinyi Ru asked again. Since you're about to die, there's no harm in telling you. I'm indeed Senior Feng Qingyang's successor. The sword technique I'm using is also from Senior Feng Qingyang's legacy. Duan Lingtian admired Qinyi Ru's integrity from the bottom of his heart. Otherwise, he would not have bothered to waste his breath on Qinyi Ru. He would have killed Qinyi Ru with his sword. However, what Duan Lingtian did not expect was that Qinyi Ru would not hesitate to kill Qinyi Ru. As soon as Duan Lingtian finished speaking, Qinyi Ru immediately swore on the lightning penalty oath to serve Duan Lingtian as his master. Duan Lingtian was still in a daze when he saw this. Wasn't Qinyi Ru supposed to have integrity? Wasn't he supposed to rather die than submit? Could it be that Qinyi Ru was putting on an act earlier? Was he a person who was afraid of death? Duan Lingtian was stunned. Kerr, Duan Siling, and Gan Ru Yin were stunned as well. Qinyi Ru's 2 servants were stunned as well. Master, he swore on the lightning penalty oath to serve Duan Lingtian as his master? The burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man exchanged a look. They could see the shock and disbelief in each other's eyes. As Qinyi Ru's servants, they knew Qinyi Ru's temperament very well. They knew Qinyi Ru was a person who valued his dignity more than his own life. For this reason, Qinyi Ru had expressed his stance earlier. He would rather die than serve Duan Lingtian as his master. Naturally, they were not surprised by this. However, Qinyi Ru's sudden change of heart after speaking to Duan Lingtian and swearing on the lightning penalty oath to serve Duan Lingtian as his master shocked them. They were even more shocked than Duan Lingtian and the 3 women by Duan Lingtian's side. I thought you were a man of integrity. As it turns out, you're just a coward. At this moment, the 3-foot-long sword that was hovering in the air disappeared, and Duan Lingtian reappeared. A hint of disdain could be seen in his eyes as he looked at Qinyi Ru. It's not shameful to serve Senior Feng Qingyang's successor as my master. Qinyi Ru shook his head nonchalantly in the face of Duan Lingtian's disdain. Then, he stood up straight and bowed respectfully at Duan Lingtian. Qinyi Ru greets master. Chapter 2352. Senior Feng Qingyang? Duan Lingtian raised an eyebrow as he studied Qinyi Ru, who had just risen to his feet. He saw a hint of reverence in the depths of Qinyi Ru's eyes. However, Duan Lingtian could see that Qinyi Ru's eyes were filled with reverence. He knew the reverence in Qinyi Ru's eyes was not directed at him. At this moment, Duan Lingtian realized Qinyi Ru had changed his mind and sworn on the lightning penalty oath because of Senior Feng Qingyang. Greetings, master. Qinyi Ru's 2 servants, the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man, stepped forward and bowed respectfully at Duan Lingtian when they saw Qinyi Ru had acknowledged Duan Lingtian as his master. Duan Lingtian was naturally their master as well. However, from the beginning until the end, Duan Lingtian did not even look at them. Duan Lingtian looked at Kerr, Duan Siling, and Gan Ru Yin, and said with a faint smile on his face, "Let's return to the Zoroastrianism." The moment Duan Lingtian's words left his mouth, he did not wait for the 3 women to reply. With a raise of his hand, A vast and majestic invisible energy swept out and shrouded the three women. It brought them to the western region of the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land at an extremely fast speed. He was like a cannonball that had been shot out of the barrel. Swoosh! Although Duan Lingtian did not cast his movement divine ability, his speed was comparable to a 4 tribulation bodiless celestial, with the help of the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. In just a blink of an eye, Duan Lingtian and the three women had already turned into tiny black dots in Chunyiru and the other's eyes. Let's go! Chunyiru shouted as he brought the burly middle-aged man and the skinny middle-aged man to chase after Duan Lingtian at an extremely fast speed. During this time, he cast all sorts of movement techniques. However, in the end, his speed was only on par with Duan Lingtian. Father, you were too awesome just now. That old man is so strong. But he was actually defeated by you. And he was even willing to recognize you as his master. Duan Xiling, who was being carried by Duan Lingtian, had an excited expression on her face as she gestured to Duan Lingtian. It was as if the one who had defeated Chunyiru and forced Chunyiru to submit to him was not her father, but herself. Although Kerr didn't say anything, she looked at Duan Lingtian with eyes full of worship. Xiling, cultivate well. Sooner or later, you'll be as strong as father. Duan Lingtian said with a smile as he patted Duan Xiling's head. Whether it was his daughter, Duan Xiling, or his wife, Ko-er's admiring gaze, Duan Lingtian still enjoyed it even though he was already used to it. Gan Ruyen stood at the side as she looked at the happy family of three. A hint of disappointment could be seen in her eyes. She felt out of place at this moment. It's only been a few years, but his strength has already risen to such a level. Gan Ruyan's heartbeat quickened when she thought about Duan Lingtian's current strength. She recalled the past. The purple-clad young man was as weak as an ant in front of her. He could only watch helplessly as she took her sister, his wife, away. Currently, the purple-clad young man's strength had far surpassed her. Perhaps, she was also as weak as an ant in his eyes. He's returning to Zoroastrianism. Is he planning to look for the sect leader to avenge Hualao? Gan Ruyen speculated inwardly. However, Gan Ruyen did not expect this. Duan Lingtian's return to Zoroastrianism was not only to look for the sect leader of Zoroastrianism to avenge Hualao, but it was also to annihilate Zoroastrianism. This was because he had learned about his other identity after coming to the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. He was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute sect. He was also the sect leader of the 7 Absolute sect. As the sect leader of the 7 Absolute sect, while he was honored, he was also burdened with a heavy responsibility. Duan Lingtian had already made up his mind. He wanted to use the remaining time he had in the mundane realm to annihilate the 3 great sects before he ascended to the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. He wanted to avenge the members of the 7 Absolute sect who had been killed by the 3 great sections. I didn't expect him to be the successor of the Fog Rain progeny and the current sect leader of the 7 Absolute sect. At that moment, Gan Ruyen couldn't help but recall the incident that left her bewildered. Previously, when Duan Lingtian had said he was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the 7 Absolute sect, she had thought Duan Lingtian was just bluffing. However, before Chunyiru acknowledged Duan Lingtian as his master, she had asked Duan Lingtian if he had inherited the sword Dao Martial Saint Feng Qingyang's legacy. She was only certain after Duan Lingtian confirmed it. Duan Lingtian was indeed the successor of the Fog Rain progeny and the current sect leader of the 7 Absolute sect. Did he join Zoroastrianism with the intention of investigating Zoroastrianism? Gan Ruyen shook her head when she thought of this. That can't be right. He must have joined Zoroastrianism for Kerr. Even if he's the current sect leader of the 7 Absolute sect, it's useless for him to join Zoroastrianism. If Master and the other members of the sect find out he's the successor of the Fog Rain progeny and the current sect leader of the 7 Absolute sect, I'm sure they'll be shocked. If he reveals his identity as the sect leader of the 7 Absolute sect, the people in the sect will definitely want to kill him. However, with his current strength, He doesn't even have to fear the sect leader. I wonder if there are any bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism as well. Although Gan Ruyin knew about bodiless celestials when she was still in Zoroastrianism, she did not know if there were any bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism. If there are, I wonder how strong they are and how strong they are compared to him. If they're stronger than him, I'm afraid he'll. Gan Ruyin did not dare to continue thinking as she looked at Duan Lingtian's back. Not long after Duan Lingtian, Chunyi Ru, and the others left, many wretched figures crawled out of the ruins of the city they were originally in. Their eyes and faces were filled with terror. Previously, before they could even react to what was going on, the saber lights that had turned into shock waves that filled the sky had already surged over like a mountain torrent, completely submerging them. If it were not for the fact that they were strong and lucky, they would have died in the ruins like the others. After one of the people crawled out of the ruins, he rose into the air and looked around. He was shocked to find that the once bustling city had been reduced to ruins. There was not a single intact building in sight. In fact, even the area around the city that had turned into ruins was now a scene of desolation. It was as though they had just gone through a devastating storm. What the hell is going on? I don't know. The saber lights that filled the sky seemed to be attacking indiscriminately. When they engulfed us, they actually destroyed the entire city. Such a terrifying attack. Who could have unleashed such a terrifying attack? A powerhouse at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage? An eminent celestial? No. Even an eminent celestial doesn't have such strength. I've read an ancient book that analyzed the strength of an eminent celestial. It's impossible for an eminent celestial to be so strong. It's only possible if more than 10 eminent celestials attacked at the same time. More than 10 eminent celestials attacked at the same time? How's that possible? It's rare to see even one eminent celestial, let alone more than 10 of them. For the survivors of this ruined city, what happened today was a mystery that would never be solved. However, there was one thing they were certain of. The saber aura that swept across the sky and drowned the entire city like a mountain torrent was definitely not the power of nature. It was man-made. What kind of person could have such a strong power? They had no idea. In fact, the culprit behind the destruction of the city was Chunyi Ru, the 4 tribulation bodiless celestial. Chunyi Ru's world-cleansing saber was an indiscriminate attack. It enveloped the entire city and killed the people closest to it within a radius of 1,000 meters. Then it swept through the entire city. Almost no one within a radius of 1,000 meters survived. In other places, only a few people with a higher cultivation base and better luck managed to survive. For this reason, apart from Duan Lingtian and Chunyi Ru, nobody knew about the conflict between Duan Lingtian and Chunyi Ru. As long as they didn't mention it, this was destined to become a case without any clues. Currently, Duan Lingtian and Chunyi Ru were making their way to the western region of the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Swoosh! Duan Lingtian traveled at full speed with the 3 women in tow. Whenever the energy in his body began to weaken, he would cast the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, to replenish his celestial origin energy so that it would be at its peak. Due to this reason, his speed was extremely fast. However, as time passed, Duan Lingtian discovered the aftereffects of continuously casting the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. Casting the elementary devouring tactic once only consumed a little of his spiritual energy. On the other hand, using the elementary devouring technique over and over again consumed a lot of mental energy, which was a huge burden on his mental energy. Just as well, I have some questions to ask him. Duan Lingtian muttered to himself. He allowed his celestial origin energy to weaken until it returned to normal. He no longer cast the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic. Chapter 2353. Since Duan Lingtian had slowed down, Chunyi Ru, the 4 tribulation bodiless celestial, caught up to him. However, he did not dare to overtake Duan Lingtian. Instead, he slowed down and followed closely behind Duan Lingtian. After all, Duan Lingtian was his master. I heard them talking about you earlier. They said you used to have another name, Chen Sandao. Duan Lingtian asked as they traveled. From the beginning until the end, he did not even turn to look at Chen Yiru. It was as though he was talking to the air. If it had been anyone else who spoke to Chen Yiru in such a manner, Chen Yiru would have flown into a rage. However, he did not dare to act impudently in front of Duan Lingtian. He was as docile as a cat as he nodded obediently. Yes, master. From now on I'll call you Sandao. You don't have any objections, right? Duan Lingtian asked indifferently. I don't dare. Since he had sworn on the lightning penalty oath to acknowledge Duan Lingtian as his master, naturally, he did not dare to disobey Duan Lingtian. Let alone Duan Lingtian calling him Sandao. Even if Duan Lingtian called him idiot and asked him if the name he gave him sounded good, he could only say it sounded good. I have some questions for you, Duan Lingtian asked again. Please ask, master. Chen Yiru replied respectfully. It was as though he was going to tell Duan Lingtian everything he knew. How many bodiless celestials like you are in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? Duan Lingtian asked the first question he wanted to know. How many bodiless celestials were there in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? If it was not for Liao Naijiang, the master of the patriarch of the Human Devil clan, Duan Lingtian would not have known about the existence of bodiless celestials in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. In the past, just like most people, he thought eminent celestials were at the peak of the mundane realms. It was not until Liao Naijiang appeared that he learned about bodiless celestials. In the past, he was just a frog in a well. Master, it's not easy to answer your question. Chen Yiru did not expect Duan Lingtian to ask such a question. He smiled wryly and said, I'm not sure how many bodiless celestials there are in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. However, I'm certain there are at least hundreds of them. Lingtian, aren't you a bodiless celestial as well? Duan Lingtian Fun. Duan Lingtian. Naturally, Duan Lingtian, Duan Chen, Duan Lingtian said. Chen Duan Lingtian, Duan Lingtian. Master, although I'm a bodiless celestial, I don't have many interactions with other bodiless celestials. Among the bodiless celestials who are still alive, some have failed their heavenly tribulations less than 1,000 years ago, while some have failed their heavenly tribulations more than 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. Most of them don't know each other, Chen Yiru explained patiently. Ever since I failed my heavenly tribulation and became a bodiless celestial, I've only met about 10 bodiless celestials. Usually, I travel and cultivate in closed-door cultivation while waiting for the bodiless celestial tribulation that occurs once every 1,000 years. Chen Yiru paused for a moment before he added inwardly, What a coincidence! I was so unlucky to have met you, but I failed. Naturally, he did not dare to say these words out loud. I see. Duan Lingtian was enlightened when he heard Chen Yiru's explanation. He asked, Does this mean bodiless celestials like you often travel in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? Yes. Chen Yiru nodded. Apart from cultivating, we travel the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. If that's the case, why are so few people aware of your existence? Duan Lingtian asked again. This was the thing that puzzled him the most. Before he returned to the upper province and met Liao Naijiang, the master of the patriarch of the Human Devil clan, just like most people, he was unaware of the existence of bodiless celestials. He thought those who stood at the peak of the mundane realms were eminent celestials. When he was in the bustling city earlier, it was apparent the people from the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land were unaware of the existence of bodiless celestials as well. Duan Lingtian still remembered the shocked expressions on their faces when they learned about the existence of bodiless celestials. Master, it's not that we intentionally hide our identities as bodiless celestials. It's just that the dragons and the phoenixes have forbidden us from doing so. Chen Yiru smiled wryly. The dragons and the phoenixes? Duan Lingtian frowned. They've forbidden us from doing so? Moreover, it's directed at bodiless celestials? As far as I know, although the dragons and the phoenixes can be considered as powerful forces in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, they're still far from being comparable to the three great sects, right? Duan Lingtian asked. He had heard about the dragons and the phoenixes in the past. He knew they were famous forces in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Even when compared to the three strongest sects, they were only slightly weaker. However, even then, they were still not comparable to the three great sections. What did Chenny Ru say to him? Chenny Ru said, yes. The dragons and the phoenixes had forbidden bodiless celestials. One had to know that in this world where the strong were respected, if one wanted to impose a ban on a person or a group of people, one must first possess strength that surpassed that person or group of people. Otherwise, who would be willing to listen to you? Who are you? Currently, the strongest group in the mundane realms was undoubtedly bodiless celestials. If a bodiless celestial said they were the second strongest group in the mundane realms, no one would dare to say they were the strongest. A three-tribulation bodiless celestial was stronger than an eminent celestial who was about to ascend. Even an eminent celestial would not be able to kill a four-tribulation bodiless celestial. When a fourth tribulation bodiless celestial attacked, he could easily shatter the void and leave cracks in the void. It was a power that only celestials could possess, let alone 5 tribulation bodiless celestials, 6 tribulation bodiless celestials, 7 tribulation bodiless celestials, 8 tribulation bodiless celestials, and 9 tribulation bodiless celestials. Naturally, 9 tribulation bodiless celestials were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Master, those who say the dragons and the phoenixes are inferior to the three great sects are just ordinary people. The dragons and the phoenixes purposely mislead the people in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, Chenny Ru said with a wry smile. In fact, in the entire upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, the phoenixes and the dragons are the strongest. To a certain extent, the three great sects are merely puppets supported by them. Duan Lingtian was taken aback by Chenny Ru's words. He felt like a door to a new world was opening for him. The three great sects, puppets supported by the dragons and the phoenixes? Duan Lingtian looked at Chenny Ru in confusion. He really could not figure it out. How did the three great sects become puppets supported by the dragons and the phoenixes? In the history of the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, there were many cases where the dragons and the phoenixes had conflicts with the three great sections. Of course, even the current sect masters of the three great sects don't know that the three great sects were supported by the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan in the beginning, and have grown to this stage today. However, that's the truth. This is not a secret in the world of bodiless celestials. Chenny Ru said. When he saw the frown on Duan Lingtian's face deepened, Chenny Ru continued to say, in the beginning, the three great sects were close to the dragons and the phoenixes. However, after the 10th generation of dragons and the phoenixes were passed down, they completely cut ties with the dragons and the phoenixes. At that time, the three great sects were strong enough to stand on their own. With the help of the dragons and the phoenixes, they became the three strongest sects in the Dao Martial Saint Land. When Chenny Ru finished speaking, he looked at Duan Lingtian again. Master, as the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, and the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, you should be very familiar with the history of the Seven Absolute sect. During the era of Sword Saint Feng Qingyang, the former successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect, the Seven Absolute sect was stronger than the three great sections. Do you know why the Seven Absolute sect didn't annihilate the three great sects in the end? If Senior Feng Qingyang had made a move at that time, the three great sects wouldn't have been able to escape death, even if they joined forces. A hint of reverence could be seen in Chenny Ru's eyes when he spoke. It was obvious the reverence in his eyes was directed at Sword Saint Feng Qingyang. Didn't they say Senior Feng Qingyang didn't care about annihilating the three great sects? There are also some who say that Senior Feng Qingyang wants to leave the three great sects behind to train the future disciples of the Seven Absolute sect, so that they won't have any opponents. Duan Lingtian told him the information he had heard in the restaurant in that city. As for what Chenny Ru had said, as the current successor of the Seven Absolute sect's first absolute, the Fog Rain progeny, and the current sect master of the Seven Absolute sect, He should know the history of the Seven Absolutes sect very well. However, he did not know how to respond. Could he tell Chen Ru? A few hours ago, he did not even know about his relationship with the Seven Absolute sect. Master, what you said is merely a rumor spread by the people in the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land. Chen Ru's eyes lit up as he said, the truth is, the reason why Senior Feng Qingyang didn't destroy the three great sects wasn't because he was holding back. It was because the dragons and phoenixes interfered. In order to stop Senior Feng Qingyang, the dragons and phoenixes even sent many bodiless celestials. There are even 7 and 8 tribulation bodiless celestials among them. This, upon hearing Chen Ru's words, Duan Lingtian gasped. Chapter 2354. There's an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial in the dragons and phoenixes? Duan Lingtian looked at Chen Ru in shock. An 8 tribulation bodiless celestial was the closest bodiless celestial to a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial. Even if Duan Lingtian was confident he would be able to fight a 7 tribulation bodiless celestial, after comprehending the 5th stage of the Supreme Sword Dao mental cultivation method, the heart and sword amalgamation, and comprehending the other divine abilities to their limits. However, he did not think he would be able to fight an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. Even if he successfully comprehended the 5th stage of the sovereign heart sword, the heart and sword as one, and comprehended the other divine abilities to their limits, he felt he was at most comparable to a 7 tribulation bodiless celestial. He did not think he was comparable to an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. At the very least, he did not think he would be able to fight an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial before he ascended to a Devata realm and became a true celestial. In that era, there were 8 tribulation bodiless celestials in the dragons and phoenixes. Chen Ru nodded respectfully before he continued to say, even in this era, I suspect there are 8 tribulation bodiless celestials in the dragons and phoenixes as well. Gasp! Duan Lingtian gasped when he heard Chen Ru's words. In this era, there were 8 tribulation bodiless celestials in the dragons and phoenixes? Needless to say, this was extremely shocking news to him. When Duan Lingtian was still in the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, he had learned about the 9 tribulation bodiless celestials. In the history of the devil clans, there were only a few 9 tribulation bodiless celestials. In other words, the strongest person in the devil clans was an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. This was because it was extremely difficult to become a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial. Bodiless celestials from the devil clans were similar to bodiless celestials from the human clans. It was difficult to become a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial from the devil clans. For this reason, the strongest person in the human world was basically an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. But now, Chen Ru was speaking to him. In this era, the devil clans and phoenix clans should have 8 tribulation bodiless celestials as well. How could he not be shocked? If there's an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial in the dragons and phoenixes clans, it's possible for them to ban the bodiless celestials from the Dao Martial Saint Land. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. At this moment, Chen Ru's voice rang in the air. Since there are 8 tribulation bodiless celestials among the dragons and phoenixes, none of the bodiless celestials, including me, dare to disobey their orders. After all, in the history of the Dao Martial Saint Land, there were many cases where bodiless celestials were killed for disobeying the rules set by the dragons and phoenixes. What Chen Ru said was similar to what Duan Lingtian was thinking. The dragon and phoenix clans were strong enough to intimidate the bodiless celestials in the Dao Martial Saint Land. Therefore, the bodiless celestials in the Dao Martial Saint Land had to obey the rules set by the dragon and phoenix clans. Zoroastrianism were puppets of the dragons and phoenixes. Ganru Yen, who was being carried by Duan Lingtian, had clearly heard the conversation between Duan Lingtian and Chen Ru. For this reason, an expression of shock and disbelief could be seen on her face. The 3 strongest sects in the Dao Martial Saint Land were puppets of the dragons and phoenixes? As a member of Zoroastrianism, Ganru Yen found it difficult to accept this fact. However, she also felt that Chen Ru Yen was lying. There was no reason for Chunyi Ru to lie since he had sworn on the lightning penalty oath to serve Duan Lingtian as his master. It was impossible for him to lie to Duan Lingtian. How many bodiless celestials are there in the three great sects? Duan Lingtian asked Chunyi Ru again, changing the topic. Of course, the shock brought to him by the Dragon and Phoenix clans had not subsided even until now. There are no bodiless celestials in the three great sections. Chunyi Ru shook his head. No bodiless celestials? Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes when he looked at Chunyi Ru again. He said in disbelief, "You're right. How's that possible? As far as I know, many people from the Zoroastrianism have failed the celestial ascension tribulation. Don't tell me none of them became bodiless celestials? No bodiless celestials?" Gan Ruyen was shocked when she heard Chunyi Ru's words. She found it hard to believe. How could there be no bodiless celestials in the three great sects? Moreover, the three great sects had existed for a long time. It was almost impossible for them to not have any bodiless celestials. The three great sects have existed for a long time. It's only natural that many people who failed the celestial ascension tribulation became bodiless celestials. Chunyi Ru patiently explained to Duan Lingtian. However, once a bodiless celestial is born in the three great sects, they'll be targeted by the Dragon and Phoenix clans. The Dragon and Phoenix clans will immediately bring them back to their clans and force them to swear on the lightning penalty oath to serve the Dragon and Phoenix clans. During this process, the Dragons and Phoenixes would execute any bodiless celestials in the three great sects who disobeyed them. The Dragons and Phoenixes did this because they didn't want the three great sects to break free from their control after they gained many powerful bodiless celestials. They disdained to control those who were weaker than bodiless celestials, but they didn't want those stronger than bodiless celestials to break free from their control. For this reason, the three great sects have never had any bodiless celestials. To be more precise, they don't have any bodiless celestials. Duan Lingtian was enlightened when he heard Chunyi Ru's words. I see. Apart from Duan Lingtian, Gan Ruyen was also enlightened. As it turns out, all the bodiless celestials in the history of Zoroastrianism were taken away by the Dragons and Phoenixes. Since there are no bodiless celestials in the sect, there's no need for him to worry about being in danger when he returns. Gan Ruyen thought to herself as she looked at Duan Lingtian. There are no bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism? Gan Ruyen was not the only one who was worried about the presence of bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism, who could threaten Duan Lingtian. Even Kerr was worried about this. She sighed in relief when she heard Chunyi Ru said, there were no bodiless celestials in Zoroastrianism. Although the three great sects don't have any bodiless celestials, almost all bodiless celestials in the Dao Martial Saint Land know about the relationship between the three great sects and the Dragons and Phoenixes. For this reason, no bodiless celestials would dare to annihilate any of the three great sects. Chunyi Ru said. Duan Lingtian nodded. He had thought of this as well. His heart was heavy when he heard this. Based on Chunyi Ru's words, the three great sects were protected by the Dragons and Phoenixes. Moreover, the Dragons and Phoenixes had 8 tribulation bodiless celestials. If Duan Lingtian wanted to annihilate the three great sects, he would have to face the threat of the Dragons and Phoenixes. This was like a bolt out of the blue to him. The Dragons and Phoenixes. At this moment, Duan Lingtian finally realized how naive he was when he thought of annihilating the three great sects. Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, as an expression of unwillingness appeared on his face. Brother Tian, even Senior Feng Qingyang didn't manage to annihilate the three great sects. There's no need for you to feel unresigned. Kerr, who had been paying attention to Duan Lingtian since the beginning, quickly comforted Duan Lingtian. It was obvious she knew what Duan Lingtian was thinking. All right. Duan Lingtian nodded when he heard Kerr's words. Although the unwillingness on his face had lessened, his heart was still filled with unwillingness. Upon hearing Kerr's words, Gan Ruyen was shocked. She immediately looked at Duan Lingtian in shock and asked, You want to annihilate the three great sects, including the Zoroastrianism? The three great sects have killed countless members of the Seven Absolutes sect. As the sect leader of the Seven Absolute Sect, it's only natural that I want to annihilate them, Duan Lingtian said as he looked at Gan Ruyin indifferently. You. Gan Ruyin was rendered speechless when she heard Duan Lingtian's words. After all, if she were in Duan Lingtian's shoes, she would have the same thoughts as well. Master, you want to annihilate the three great sects? Chen Yiru was also shocked by Duan Lingtian's words. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded. Master, I'm afraid it's impossible for you to annihilate the three great sects. Chen Yiru smiled wryly as he said. Even Senior Feng Qingyang failed to annihilate the three great sects after killing the dragons, an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial, the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan, which protect the three great sects, are extremely powerful and have a background that is beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Senior Feng Qingyang killed the dragons, an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial? As soon as Chen Yiru finished speaking, Duan Lingtian turned to look at Chen Yiru with an expression of shock and disbelief. Duan Lingtian was an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial. How could Senior Feng Qingyang be able to kill him? How's this possible? Gan Ruyin looked at Chen Yiru in disbelief. As far as I know, Senior Feng Qingyang from the Seven Absolute Sect wasn't a bodiless celestial. He was an eminent celestial, who had successfully passed the Celestial Ascension Tribulation. How could an eminent celestial kill an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial? Madam, Chen Yiru looked at Gan Ruyin respectfully and lowered his head as he replied. Ordinary people in the Dao Martial Saint Land might not have heard of this. Chapter 2355. Usually, if Chen Yiru had misunderstood that Gan Ruyin was Duan Lingtian's woman and addressed Gan Ruyin as his wife, Duan Lingtian would have corrected him. However, since Chen Yiru's words were too shocking and involved Feng Qingyang, Duan Lingtian did not have the time to argue with him. Not only did Duan Lingtian not care about Chen Yiru's words, but he even stopped in his tracks and turned around to look at Chen Yiru intently. Duan Lingtian Ke, Duan Xiling, and Gan Ruyin came to a halt as well. Chen Yiru, who was leading his 2 servants, also came to a halt. At this moment, Duan Lingtian and Gan Ruyin were not the only ones who were staring at Chen Yiru. Even Ke and Duan Xiling were looking at Chen Yiru. It was obvious they wanted to know what happened next as well. Faced with Duan Lingtian and the others' gazes, Chen Yiru did not dare to keep them in suspense. He quickly said, at that time, when Senior Feng Qingyang wanted to annihilate the 3 great sects, the dragons and phoenixes sent 5 7 tribulation bodiless celestials and 2 8 tribulation bodiless celestials to stop Senior Feng Qingyang. During that battle, Senior Feng Qingyang fought against 7 people and killed 2 7 tribulation bodiless celestials from the phoenixes, 1 7 tribulation bodiless celestial, and 1 8 tribulation bodiless celestial from the dragons. After that, Senior Feng Qingyang was severely injured. After that battle, Senior Feng Qingyang managed to escape unscathed. All the bodiless celestials thought that as long as Senior Feng Qingyang recovered, he would be able to ignore the threat from the dragons and phoenixes and annihilate the 3 great sects. The 8 tribulation bodiless celestial from the Phoenix Clan has successfully passed the 9th bodiless celestial tribulation and become a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial. At this point, Chen Yiru's tone became serious. 9th tribulation scattered immortal. When Chen Yiru mentioned 9 tribulation bodiless celestials, Duan Lingtian's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. 9 tribulation bodiless celestials were existences who stood at the peak of the mundane realms. Throughout the long history of the devil clans, the number of 9 tribulation bodiless celestials was pitifully few. Duan Lingtian did not know about the 9 tribulation bodiless celestials in the history of the Dao Martial Saint Land. However, based on the rarity of 9 tribulation bodiless celestials in the devil clans, it was not difficult for him to guess that the number of 9 tribulation bodiless celestials in the history of the Dao Martial Saint Land must be extremely rare as well. But now he heard Chen Yiru's words. During Senior Feng Qingyang's era, there was a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial in the Phoenix Clan. Does this mean Senior Feng Qingyang didn't manage to annihilate the three great sects because there was a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial in the Phoenix clan? Duan Lingtian asked as he looked at Chen Yiru. At the same time, Duan Lingtian's heart was in turmoil. Senior Feng Qingyang was able to kill 8 tribulation bodiless celestials after becoming an eminent celestial before he ascended? What kind of terrifying strength was that? Even if I have the assist-type divine ability, the elementary devouring tactic, and even if I completely comprehend all 5 stages of the Supreme Sword Dao mental cultivation method, the Sovereign Heart Sword, my combat strength is only comparable to a 7 tribulation bodiless celestial. At that time, my strength was almost at its peak before I ascended. At that time, it was difficult for me to kill a 7 tribulation bodiless celestial, let alone an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial, who was stronger than a 7 tribulation bodiless celestial. For this reason, Duan Lingtian was shocked when he learned that Feng Qingyang had killed an 8 tribulation bodiless celestial, when he was only an eminent celestial. He could not figure out how Feng Qingyang had done it. That's one of the reasons. Chen Yiru nodded. Moreover, if Senior Feng Qingyang wanted to leave, even the 9 tribulation bodiless celestial from the Phoenix clan wouldn't be able to stop him. For this reason, Senior Feng Qingyang, the dragons and the phoenixes came to an agreement. Senior Feng Qingyang wouldn't attack the 3 great sections. The dragons and the phoenixes also promised that they wouldn't interfere in the enmity between the 7 Absolute Sect and the 3 great sects as long as the 7 Absolute Sect doesn't affect the 3 great sections. Duan Lingtian nodded. If that was the case, it would explain why Senior Feng Qingyang did not destroy the 3 great sections. Master. At this moment, Chen Yiru seemed to have recalled something. He looked at Duan Lingtian and reminded him. Due to the agreement between the dragons, the phoenixes and Senior Feng Qingyang, the dragons and the phoenixes won't attack the 7 Absolute Sect. However, if someone like Senior Feng Qingyang, who can suppress the 3 great sects, appears in the 7 Absolute Sect, I'm sure they'll interfere without damaging the 7 Absolute Sect's foundation. For example, with your current strength, you're strong enough to defeat the 3 great sections. However, if you make a move and intend to shake the foundation of the 3 great sects, the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan will definitely not stand by idly. Chen Yiru's expression turned solemn when he reached the end of his sentence. He did not want his master to offend the dragons and the phoenixes. After all, even if his master had strength comparable to a 6 tribulation bodiless celestial, he might not be able to survive if he offended the dragons and the phoenixes. After all, the dragons and the phoenixes had only promised not to interfere as long as the 7 Absolute Sect did not affect the 3 great sects' foundation. However, if Duan Lingtian wanted to destroy the 3 great sects' foundation, they would not agree to it. All right. Duan Lingtian nodded. His expression was grave as he felt powerless. Previously, when he left the city, he was in high spirits. He thought he could easily kill Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, to avenge Hua Lao. After that, he would destroy the Zoroastrianism sect. After destroying Zoroastrianism, he would destroy the Zhuangzi Buddhism and the Heaven Divination sect. He wanted to avenge the deaths of the 7 Absolute Sect's members and fulfill his responsibility as the sect leader of the 7 Absolute Sect. However, he did not expect the 3 great sects to have such a strong background. With the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan around, even if I can destroy the 3 great sects before they realize what's going on, with their strength, it's entirely possible for them to rebuild the 3 great sections. Moreover, they might even attack the other members of the 7 Absolute Sect out of anger over what I've done. At this moment, Duan Lingtian thought of many things before he finally came to a conclusion. It would be easy to destroy the 3 great sects, but it would be difficult to deal with the dragons and the phoenixes. Unless I'm strong enough to suppress all the bodiless celestials in the dragons and the phoenixes, it's impossible for me to destroy the 3 great sections. Although Duan Lingtian was unwilling to accept this fact, he had no choice but to accept it. Even if I can't destroy the 3 great sects, Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, must die. After a long while, Duan Lingtian finally regained his senses. His eyes were filled with hatred that seemed capable of incinerating everything. At this moment, Duan Lingtian vented all his frustrations on Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. Due to his fear of the dragons and the phoenixes, he could not destroy Zoroastrianism. On the other hand, killing the sect leader of Zoroastrianism would not shake the foundation of Zoroastrianism. According to the agreement between the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan, they were not allowed to interfere in the feud between the 7 Absolute Sect and the 3 Great Sects, as long as the 3 Great Sects were not shaken. Let's continue on our journey, Duan Lingtian said angrily, as he led the 3 women to continue on their journey. As for Chen Yiru, he quickly followed after Duan Lingtian with his 2 servants. Sword Saint Feng Qingyang was only an eminent celestial back then, but he was able to kill 8 tribulation bodiless celestials? Based on what Chen Yiru said, Feng Qingyang was even able to escape unscathed from a 9 tribulation bodiless celestial. Gan Ruyin finally regained her senses after being led by Duan Lingtian. She could not help but feel shocked. Duan Lingtian and the others traveled at a very fast speed. It did not take long before they arrived at the western region of the upper province of the Dao Martial Saint Land, and arrived at the Zoroastrianism's estate. Zoroastrianism. Duan Lingtian am back. Duan Lingtian's eyes shone brightly as he looked at the Zoroastrianism's estate in front of him. His eyes shone brightly like the stars in the night sky, illuminating the darkness of the night. Swoosh! Duan Lingtian led Kerr and the other 2 women into the Zoroastrianism's estate in just a flash. They flew past the Zoroastrianism's 4 symbols sanctums and arrived in the sky above the saint land of Zoroastrianism. Swoosh! Chen Yiru and his 2 servants followed after Duan Lingtian and the others. Gan Ruyin looked down at the saint land of Zoroastrianism with a nostalgic expression on her face. Tang Xian, show yourself. Duan Lingtian shouted coldly. Like a clap of thunder, his voice swept through the Zoroastrianism's saint land, Zoroastrianism's 4 symbols sanctums, and finally, the entire Zoroastrianism's estate. As soon as Duan Lingtian shouted, Duan Lingtian and the others disappeared. With just a flash, Duan Lingtian brought the 3 women through the clouds above the Zoroastrianism's saint land, and arrived at the floating islands above the Saint Island in the Zoroastrianism's saint land. Duan Lingtian directly went to the floating island that was situated at the highest point. It was like an emperor that was surrounded by stars. He stared at the floating island coldly. This floating island was the cultivation place of Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. After so many years, Duan Lingtian did not feel nostalgic when he came here again. In his heart, there was only boundless sorrow. This was because Hualao had sacrificed his life to pave a way for him and the 3 women by his side. He sent them to the Debussy subterranean so they could escape Tang Xian's clutches. Tang Xian, show yourself. Tang Xian, show yourself. Chapter 2356. Tang Xian, show yourself. The thunderous voice reverberated in the Zoroastrianism's estate, causing a commotion in the Zoroastrianism sect. It shocked all the Zoroastrianism members. Who was Tang Xian? He was the supreme sect leader of Zoroastrianism. His cultivation base was at the 9th form of the Saint Celestial stage, and he was ranked 4th on the Supreme Saint ranking. However, someone had actually barged into the Zoroastrianism's estate and asked their sect leader to show himself. How arrogant was that? Is this person tired of living? He actually dares to provoke Lord Sect Leader. Soon after, many Zoroastrianism disciples in the Zoroastrianism sect leader's estate began to make similar remarks. With Lord Sect Leader's current strength, apart from Nie Wutian, who's ranked 1st on the Supreme Saint ranking, even the Great Priest of Heaven Divination sect, and the Supreme Elder of Zhuangzi Buddhism wouldn't dare to act so arrogantly in front of our Zoroastrianism, right? Many people found it hard to believe. That person, is he seeking death? Many people felt the owner of the voice was seeking death. Just when most people were shocked by the arrogant words, a different voice spread out. That's right. That's right. That's right. Don't you think that voice is a little familiar? Similar words were circulating in the Black Turtle Sanctum, one of the 4 symbols sanctums of Zoroastrianism, and the Saint Island in the Saint Land of Zoroastrianism. Many people felt that the arrogant voice sounded too arrogant. That arrogant voice sounded very familiar. It was as if he had heard it somewhere before. I remember now. At this moment, someone finally regained his senses. This voice, it's exactly the same as Guardian Ling Tian's voice. Guardian Ling Tian? Now that you mention it, it's true. More and more people regain their senses. It can't be Guardian Ling Tian, can it? Put aside the fact that it's impossible for him to do that. Even if he had a falling out with Lord Sect Leader, I don't think he would dare to act so arrogantly in front of Lord Sect Leader, right? I don't think it's Ling Tian either. It should be someone who sounds like Guardian Ling Tian. In this world, people who look alike can be found everywhere. Not to mention people who sound alike. Many people in the Zoroastrianism's estate thought the arrogant voice sounded like Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. However, they were in agreement. The arrogant voice belonged to someone whose voice was similar to Guardian Ling Tian's voice. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Almost as soon as Duan Ling Tian finished speaking, a few figures shot out from the floating islands below the floating island that looked like a moon surrounded by a myriad of stars. Master, Gan Ru Yen, who was standing behind Duan Ling Tian, could not help but greet one of the figures excitedly. Gan Ru Yan's master was none other than Qing Hua, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. When the green-clad old man heard the voice of his direct disciple, Gan Ru Yen, the moment he appeared, he was so excited that his old face began to tremble. However, despite his excitement, he still maintained a stern expression on his face as he sent a voice transmission to Gan Ru Yen. It's one thing for both of you to leave, but why did you come back? Don't you know it's dangerous to come back? A hint of worry could be heard in Qing Hua's voice when he reached the end of his sentence. Qing Hua, the guardian of the Zoroastrianism, had long regarded Gan Ru Yen as his daughter. Therefore, when he saw that Gan Ru Yen had returned, he was both happy and worried about Gan Ru Yan's current dangerous situation. Previously, the sect leader of the Zoroastrianism had forced the guardian Duan Ling Tian to leave because of the saintess. He and the other 3 protectors felt that they shouldn't have done that. They all agreed. With Duan Ling Tian's importance to Zoroastrianism, the Zoroastrianism's rules could have given him the green light for the saintess. However, he could clearly feel the stubbornness of the leader of Zoroastrianism. The sect leader of Zoroastrianism viewed the saintess as the reincarnation of a goddess. It was obvious he would not show mercy just because of how important Duan Ling Tian was to Zoroastrianism. Otherwise, he would not have forced Duan Ling Tian and the others to leave. For this reason, Qing Hua could not help but feel anxious when he saw his direct disciple, Gan Ru Yen, had returned with Duan Ling Tian. Master, don't worry. With him around, I won't be in any danger. Gan Ru Yen shook her head when she heard her master's voice transmission. She did not seem to be in a hurry at all. Instead, she sounded as though she was trying to console her master. She was trying to persuade Qing Hua not to worry. Guardian Ling Tian? At the same time, the other 3 Zoroastrianism guardians who came with Qing Hua, Zifeng, Hong Yin and Leng Ying, turned to look at Duan Ling Tian. Based on their expressions, it was obvious they were displeased. Guardian Ling Tian, even if your strength is extraordinary and you're second only to Lord Sect Leader in Zoroastrianism, you don't have the right to be so presumptuous in front of Lord Sect Leader, right? Not only did you call Lord Sect Leader by name, but you even asked Lord Sect Leader to come out. Even if you're a guardian of Zoroastrianism and can ignore most of the rules of Zoroastrianism, you shouldn't be so arrogant, right? Guardian Ling Tian, you're finally back. In the end, Qing Hua was the one who spoke and broke the silence. Yes, Duan Ling Tian nodded nonchalantly. He had a good impression of Qing Hua, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. Moreover, Qing Hua was the master of his wife's sister. Since Qing Hua had taken the initiative to greet him, naturally, he could not ignore him. Even with his current strength, He could easily kill an existence like Qing Hua with a wave of his hand. Guardian Ling Tian. At this moment, Lung Ying, the guardian of Zoroastrianism, stepped forward and glared at Duan Ling Tian angrily. Even if you're a guardian of Zoroastrianism, and can ignore most of the rules of Zoroastrianism, even a guardian of Zoroastrianism will be punished for disrespecting Lord Sect leader. Lung Ying was the former hall master of the Law Enforcement Hall. Although he was no longer the hall master of the Law Enforcement Hall, he still could not stand Duan Ling Tian, acting so presumptuously in front of Lord Sect leader of Zoroastrianism. Although Zifeng and Hong Yin did not say anything, it was not difficult to figure out their stance based on the displeasure on their faces. A guardian of Zoroastrianism? Duan Ling Tian could not help but smile when he heard Lung Ying's words. The guardians of Zoroastrianism did not understand why Duan Ling Tian suddenly smiled. Duan Ling Tian's eyes narrowed. In the next moment. Today, I, Duan Ling Tian, hereby announce that I've officially left Zoroastrianism. I'm no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. When Duan Ling Tian spoke again, his voice rang out like a bell. It resounded throughout the Zoroastrianism and reached the ears of everyone in the Zoroastrianism base. Everyone in the Zoroastrianism base was shocked. Today, I, Duan Ling Tian, hereby announce that I've officially left Zoroastrianism. I'm no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Today, I, Duan Ling Tian, hereby announce that I've officially left Zoroastrianism. I'm no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. At the same time, the echoes continued to echo throughout the Zoroastrianism base. It was as if the speaker was reminding everyone in the Zoroastrianism base. The person who spoke earlier and the person who spoke now was the same person. It was the guardian of Zoroastrianism, Duan Ling Tian. That's really Guardian Ling Tian's voice? In the Zoroastrianism base, the elders and disciples were all stunned. The owner of the voice earlier was really Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism. Can anyone tell me, what's going on? What's going on? Why did Guardian Ling Tian ask the leader to come out in an unfriendly tone? Then, he announced that he's leaving Zoroastrianism and is no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. I haven't heard any news about Guardian Ling Tian for a few years. Now that he's here, the entire Zoroastrianism base is alarmed. He's really amazing. Now, the people in the Zoroastrianism base couldn't figure out why Duan Ling Tian, the guardian of Zoroastrianism, would suddenly do this. However, there was one thing they were certain of. There must be a reason behind all of this. Moreover, it was highly likely that the leader of Zoroastrianism had done something to upset this guardian. Otherwise, why would he be so arrogant and bold as to ask the leader of Zoroastrianism to come out and announce that he's leaving Zoroastrianism and is no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism? What's going on with him? What's going on? In the Zoroastrianism base, Lu Yun, Lu Mu, and the others who were close to Duan Ling Tian were stunned when they heard Duan Ling Tian's thunderous words. They had no idea what was going on at all. No matter what's going on, I'm afraid he's offending the leader by making such a ruckus in front of him and announcing that he's leaving Zoroastrianism. While Lu Yun, Lu Mu, and the others were stunned, they couldn't help but worry about Duan Ling Tian's current situation. At this moment, those who were close to Duan Ling Tian were naturally worried about Duan Ling Tian. On the other hand, those who did not have a good relationship with Duan Ling Tian were overjoyed when they heard Duan Ling Tian's words that spread to the entire fire worship sex estate. This Duan Ling Tian actually announced that he's leaving Zoroastrianism and is no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism? If he's a guardian of Zoroastrianism and dares to act presumptuously in front of the leader, perhaps the leader would show him mercy. As for now, I'm afraid Duan Ling Tian is in trouble. Chapter 2357. Today, I, Duan Ling Tian, hereby announce that I've officially renounced Zoroastrianism. I'm no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Duan Ling Tian's words reverberated in the ears of the guardians of Zoroastrianism. It took them a long time to regain their senses. This was especially true for Guardian Lung Ying. He did not expect Duan Lingtian to say something like this. As soon as he finished speaking, Duan Lingtian had directly announced that he was renouncing Zoroastrianism. He was no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Lung Ying was stunned. He could not help but feel a wave of helplessness. Is this necessary? All I did was casually say that I was going to punish you. Is there a need for you to announce that you're renouncing Zoroastrianism? Aren't you being a scoundrel? Scoundrel? How shameless. Lung Ying thought to himself. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He thought Duan Lingtian had only announced his renunciation of Zoroastrianism after listening to his words. He thought Duan Lingtian would no longer be a guardian of Zoroastrianism. However, he did not know that Duan Lingtian's words were true. Even without Lung Ying's words, Duan Lingtian would still have announced his renunciation of Zoroastrianism. This was because he knew his other identity. He was no longer a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Currently, he was the successor of the Fog Rain progeny, the first absolute of the Seven Absolute sect. He was the current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect. Since the Seven Absolute sect and the other three great sects, including Zoroastrianism, were sworn enemies, as the sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect, it was only natural that Duan Lingtian would no longer be a guardian of Zoroastrianism. Otherwise, if the souls of the ancestors of the Seven Absolute sect who had passed away found out about this, they would be furious. The current sect leader of the Seven Absolute sect was also a guardian of Zoroastrianism. They would most likely be so angry that they would vomit blood. Guardian Lingtian, you shouldn't joke around like this. Zifeng quickly regained his senses. He looked at Duan Lingtian and said sternly. After Protector Hong Yun and Protector Qing, who regained their senses, they nodded in agreement with Protector Zifeng's words. As for Lung Ying, he thought he was the one who had forced Duan Lingtian to renounce Zoroastrianism. Therefore, he did not say anything even though he was furious. He did not want Duan Lingtian to leave Zoroastrianism. Lung Zoroastrianism Lung Ying Lung Lung. Lung Lingtian. Joke. Duan Lingtian shook his head when he heard Zifeng's words. Guardian Zifeng, I'm not joking. I, Duan Lingtian, have come back today for two things. Firstly, to renounce Zoroastrianism. Secondly, to kill. Before Duan Lingtian could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by a voice that suddenly rang in the air. So, Guardian Lingtian, are you determined to renounce Zoroastrianism? As soon as the voice rang in the air, a figure appeared in front of the four great guardians of the fire worship sect. It was as though he had appeared out of thin air. He was a tall and burly middle-aged man. He wore a long white robe with a red flame embroidered on it. It was similar to the uniform of the elders and disciples of Zoroastrianism. Of course, it was only similar because the flame embroidered on his white robe was unique. If one took a closer look, they would see that the robe was covered in flames. The flame embroidered on the middle-aged man's robe seemed to form a long divine dragon that circled around his body. It was as if the true dragon was protecting his body. Although the middle-aged man was tall and burly, his appearance was very proper. He did not look boorish at all. Regardless of whether it was her figure or her face, every part of her was just right, almost perfect. There was a majestic aura between his brows. It was as though he could make all living things submit to him. Tang Xian. Duan Lingtian narrowed his eyes when he saw the middle-aged man. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. A raging fire burned in the depths of his heart. It was as though it could burn everything to ashes. Sect leader. As soon as the middle-aged man appeared, the four Zoroastrianism protectors, Zifeng, Qinghua, Hong Yun and Lung Ying, hurriedly bowed to him respectfully. The middle-aged man was none other than the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, Tang Xian. Saint. As soon as Tang Xian appeared, he looked at Kerr who was standing next to Duan Lingtian. His eyes lit up immediately. It was as though to him, the return of this woman was the most important thing to him. In fact, this was indeed the case. Then, Tang Xian turned to Duan Lingtian and said calmly, Protector Lingtian, I didn't expect that the first thing you did after returning to Zoroastrianism, after not seeing you for a few years, is to call me by my name and ask me to show myself. Tang Xian's voice turned slightly gloomy when he reached the end of his sentence. In his eyes, Duan Lingtian was only a protector. Duan Lingtian was only a small protector of Zoroastrianism. Even if Duan Lingtian was strong, he did not have the right to yell at him. Moreover, Duan Lingtian had called him by his name and asked him to show himself in front of all the members of Zoroastrianism. Duan Lingtian was trampling on Tang Xian's dignity as the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. Naturally, even though Tang Xian was furious and filled with killing intent, he knew he could not kill Duan Lingtian now. Duan Lingtian had blasphemed the saint of Zoroastrianism. This meant he had offended the godlike man. He had to imprison Duan Lingtian and wait for the godlike man to descend upon the mundane realm. At that time, he would hand Duan Lingtian over to the godlike man and let the godlike man decide whether Duan Lingtian lived or died. This was the only way to appease the godlike man. If Tang Xian killed Duan Lingtian, the godlike man would vent his anger on Tang Xian. So what? Duan Lingtian replied calmly when he heard Tang Xian's words. Based on his words, it was obvious he was not afraid of Tang Xian at all. A few years ago, Tang Xian was no match for Tang Xian. He could only look up to Tang Xian and was powerless in front of him. Today, a few years later, Tang Xian was like an ant in his eyes that couldn't even withstand a single blow. Ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage? So what? Tang Xian had killed a three-tribulation bodiless celestial, who was stronger than an eminent celestial. A mere cultivator at the ninth form of the Saint Celestial stage, who was not even an eminent celestial, was nothing to him. So what? Duan Lingtian's casual reply not only shocked Tang Xian, but even the four guardians of Zoroastrianism were dumbfounded. Previously, they had thought Duan Lingtian was only acting so presumptuously because the sect leader of Zoroastrianism was not present. They did not expect Duan Lingtian would still be so arrogant even when the sect leader of Zoroastrianism was present. It was obvious Duan Lingtian did not take the sect leader of Zoroastrianism seriously at all. Could it be that he's serious? Does he really intend to leave Zoroastrianism? The four guardians could not help but think to themselves. Good. Very good. Duan Lingtian's casual reply infuriated Tang Xian. Tang Xian's expression darkened immediately. Guardian Lingtian seems to be getting bolder and bolder after not seeing him for a few years. However, I still want to confirm something. Guardian Lingtian, do you really intend to leave Zoroastrianism and stop being a guardian of Zoroastrianism? Tang Xian's gaze on Duan Lingtian grew sharper as he spoke. It was as though his gaze had turned into a sword. It was as though he would kill Duan Lingtian if he dared to say no. As soon as Tang Xian finished speaking, the four guardians of Zoroastrianism stared at Duan Lingtian intently. They wanted to know how Duan Lingtian would respond to their sect leader of Zoroastrianism. I don't like to repeat what I've said before. Duan Lingtian replied to Tang Xian's question calmly. He did not beat around the bush and was straightforward. Duan Lingtian's reply sent chills down the spines of the four guardians of Zoroastrianism. Is Duan Lingtian crazy? Where does he get the courage to do this? Isn't he afraid that our sect leader will kill him in a fit of rage? If he's a guardian of the fire worship sect, we might still be able to resolve the matter of him blaspheming the saint girl. However, if he's not a guardian of the fire worship sect, putting aside the fact that he's disrespectful to Lord sect leader, just the blasphemy against the saint girl is enough to make him suffer. An outsider blaspheming the saint of Zoroastrianism is a crime punishable by death. At this moment, the four guardians of Zoroastrianism thought that Duan Lingtian had gone mad. Otherwise, how could he be so arrogant in front of their sect leader of Zoroastrianism? Of course, it was not as though they had not considered the possibility that Duan Lingtian might have the courage to do so. However, as soon as they thought of it, they dismissed it. This was because they felt that it was impossible and unrealistic. It should be noted that it had only been a few years since Duan Lingtian left Zoroastrianism. It was unrealistic for Duan Lingtian to have the strength to be fearless against their sect leader of Zoroastrianism in just a few years. Good. Very good. Tang Xian repeated the word good a few more times. His tone was getting lower and lower. It was obvious how angry he was right now. Tang Xian's gaze was as cold as a knife as he spoke. I, Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, hereby announce that Duan Lingtian has blasphemed the saint of Zoroastrianism. From today onward, Duan Lingtian is expelled from Zoroastrianism. Tang Xian's words were like a clap of thunder that spread throughout the Zoroastrianism's base. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as Tang Xian finished speaking, the expressions of the four guardians of Zoroastrianism changed drastically. They knew very well what was going on. Chapter 2358. I, Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, hereby announce that Duan Lingtian has blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism. From today onward, Duan Lingtian is expelled from Zoroastrianism. I, Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, hereby announce that Duan Lingtian has blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism. From today onward, Duan Lingtian is expelled from Zoroastrianism. Tang Xian's words that contained a vast amount of saint origin reverberated in the Zoroastrianism estate. During this process, the entire Zoroastrianism estate was in an uproar. This is Lord Sect Leader's voice? Lord Sect Leader said that Guardian Lingtian has blasphemed the saint girl? What's going on? Upon hearing Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, saying that Duan Lingtian had blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism, the people in the Zoroastrianism estate were stunned. After a long while, someone finally regained his senses. At this moment, the Zoroastrianism estate became even more lively. The saint girl that Lord Sect Leader mentioned must be the saint girl of Zoroastrianism, who has been missing for many years, right? That must be it. Apart from that saint girl, there's no other saint girl of Zoroastrianism. Moreover, that saint girl was blasphemed and gave birth to a daughter. Didn't they say that the man who blasphemed the saint girl is from the lower province of the Dao Martial Saint Land? Don't forget that Guardian Lingtian is from the lower province. Previously, he was the young mansion master of Azure Cloud Mansion, one of the two most powerful forces in the lower province. That's right. It's no secret in the upper province that Guardian Lingtian is from the lower province. The group of Zoroastrianism elders and disciples were shocked when they learned that the person who blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism was Duan Lingtian. Although they had heard that the saint girl of Zoroastrianism had been blasphemed by a man from the lower province, they did not expect it to be the person who blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism. They did not expect that the person who blasphemed the saint girl of Zoroastrianism would be Guardian Lingtian. In that case, the saint girl's daughter is Guardian Lingtian's child? I really didn't expect that man to be Guardian Lingtian. Guardian Elder, Guardian Sect Leader of Zoroastrianism. Guardian Sect Leader, Guardian Elder Lingtian. Didn't he? Z-Sect's Tian, Xian's Tian, Ling Sect Leader he Lingtian Sect Leader. Ling Sect. That's possible. After all, he Lingtian Sect Leader's decision to expel him from Zoroastrianism and Lord Sect Leader's decision to expel him from Zoroastrianism are two completely different concepts. That's right. If it's the former, people will think he's leaving Zoroastrianism. However, if it's the latter, it won't sound good to others. At this moment, many people began to speculate. The reason Duan Lingtian had announced his decision to leave Zoroastrianism was because of the saint girl of Zoroastrianism. Lord Sect Leader is going to expel Guardian Lingtian from Zoroastrianism because of this. I don't think there's a need for that, right? As far as I know, Guardians have always enjoyed special privileges in Zoroastrianism. They can ignore some of the rules, right? Why can't they do it this time? The saint girl of Zoroastrianism wandered to the lower province when she was still young and became acquainted with Guardian Lingtian. We can't blame her. Since she's acquainted with Guardian Lingtian, what's wrong with granting them their wish? If we grant them their wish, it might become a beautiful story in the history of Zoroastrianism. Compared to losing a powerhouse like Guardian Lingtian, the saint girl's mistake is nothing to Zoroastrianism. More than 90% of the people in the Zoroastrianism base did not want their sect leader to expel Guardian Ling Tian because of this. Instead, they advocated for Guardian Ling Tian and the saint girl of Zoroastrianism to be together. I think we should plead on behalf of Guardian Ling Tian. I think so too. Guardian Ling Tian is too important to Zoroastrianism. If we lose Guardian Ling Tian, Zoroastrianism is no different from losing an arm. In order to keep Guardian Ling Tian, we should marry our saint girl to him. Let's go. Let's plead on behalf of Guardian Ling Tian. In the Holy Land of Zoroastrianism, a group of Zoroastrianism elders and disciples rose into the air and flew toward the Holy Island. In the four symbols sanctums of Zoroastrianism, apart from the sanctum leader of the Azure Dragon Sanctum, the sanctum leaders of the other three sanctums, and their elders, had also left the four symbols sanctums and entered the Holy Land. Even the disciples of the four symbols sanctums wished they could grow a pair of wings and fly into the Holy Land of Zoroastrianism to plead on behalf of their guardian Ling Tian. In the sky above the Holy Island of Zoroastrianism, a group of people flew through the clouds and arrived near Duan Ling Tian and Tang Xian's group. These people were led by the two vice sect leaders of Zoroastrianism. Below them were a group of golden flame elders, silver flame elders, and bronze flame elders from Zoroastrianism, as well as a group of Holy Land disciples. In just a blink of an eye, the area was filled with people. Why are all of you here? Guardian Lung Ying of Zoroastrianism could not help but frown when he saw the group of people who had gathered around them in just a blink of an eye. However, no one paid any attention to him. Everyone's eyes were trained on Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism. It was as though Tang Xian had a special charm that attracted them. Lord Sect Leader, please retract your order. In the end, the two vice sect leaders of Zoroastrianism took the lead and bowed to Tang Xian. Based on their words, they wanted Tang Xian to retract his words about spreading Zoroastrianism in the Holy Land of Zoroastrianism. Lord Sect Leader, please retract your order. Lord Sect Leader, please retract your order. Some of the people who were slow to react, and those who had just arrived began to plead with Tang Xian to retract his words. They hoped Tang Xian would not expel Duan Ling Tian from Zoroastrianism. Do all of you know what you're doing? Tang Xian looked at the group of Zoroastrianism elders and disciples around him with a gloomy expression on his face. Tang Xian did not expect the elders and disciples of the fire worship sect would come and ask him to rescind his order just because he had mentioned Duan Ling Tian's crimes and expelled him from the fire worship sect. In other words, he had to take back what he had said earlier. Lord Sect Leader. At this moment, one of the two vice sect leaders of Zoroastrianism spoke up. Although Guardian Ling Tian has violated the rules of the sect, it's understandable. Moreover, he has helped us defeat the powerhouses invited by Zhuangzi Buddhism. He's made up for his crimes. That's right, Lord Sect Leader. The other sect leader of Zoroastrianism chimed in. With Guardian Ling Tian's current strength, if he stays in Zoroastrianism, we'll be like a tiger that has grown wings. It's not worth it to give up such a powerhouse for a small rule. If the marriage between Guardian Ling Tian and the saint girl is passed down to the future generations, it'll definitely be a good story. Lord Sect Leader, please grant Guardian Ling Tian and the saint girl's wish. A golden flame elder of Zoroastrianism spoke loudly. Instantly, Lord Sect Leader, please grant Guardian Ling Tian and the saint girl's wish. Lord Sect Leader, please grant Guardian Ling Tian and the saint girl's wish. A group of elders and disciples of Zoroastrianism began to plead with Tang Xian. They hoped that Tang Xian would not be bothered by such trifles and grant Guardian Ling Tian and the saint girl's wish. If the four guardians of Zoroastrianism had only just arrived, they would have followed suit and pleaded with the sect leader of Zoroastrianism as well. Since they had arrived a long time ago, they could vaguely sense something was amiss. The reason Duan Ling Tian announced his decision to leave Zoroastrianism had nothing to do with the saint girl. Duan Ling Tian, who was confronting Tang Xian, did not expect such a thing to happen. A group of elders and disciples of Zoroastrianism came to plead on his behalf. Moreover, based on their whispers, they thought Duan Lingtian's decision to leave Zoroastrianism had something to do with Kerr. Duan Lingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Duan Lingtian's decision to leave Zoroastrianism had nothing to do with Kerr. Although Duan Lingtian did not know whether to laugh or cry, he could not help but feel touched. He knew the Zoroastrianism group was pleading on his behalf, because he was second only to the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, Tang Xian. The Zoroastrianism group was still unaware that Duan Lingtian's strength was far superior to Tang Xian's. Everyone, Duan Lingtian, could not ignore the appearance of the Zoroastrianism group and pleading on his behalf. The reason I announced my decision to leave Zoroastrianism has nothing to do with my wife Kerr, the former saint girl of Zoroastrianism. What? Guardian Ling Tian's decision to leave Zoroastrianism had nothing to do with the saint girl? What's going on? If it's not because of his relationship with the saint girl, what else could it be? As soon as Duan Lingtian spoke, the group of people who were pleading on his behalf was stunned. They had no idea what was going on. For a moment, the group of Zoroastrianism elders and disciples turned to look at Duan Lingtian. Guardian Lingtian, if it's not because of your relationship with the saint girl, why are you leaving Zoroastrianism? Is there something about Zoroastrianism that you're unhappy with? One of the vice sect leaders of Zoroastrianism immediately asked Duan Lingtian. That's right. Guardian Lingtian, you must have a reason for leaving Zoroastrianism, right? Another vice sect leader of Zoroastrianism chimed in. Of course, there's a reason. Duan Lingtian nodded. Then, under the watchful eyes of the group of people, he said unhurriedly, the reason is, due to my identity, it's impossible for me to continue staying in Zoroastrianism. Identity? What identity? Upon hearing Duan Lingtian's words, the group of people from Zoroastrianism looked at Duan Lingtian in confusion. At this moment, even Tang Xian, the sect leader of Zoroastrianism, and the four guardians of Zoroastrianism, looked at Duan Lingtian in confusion. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Duan Lingtian spoke in a clear voice. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.